Hello. The course you're about to view right now is going to give you a full comprehensive idea as if you've never coded how to build out real backends using artificial intelligence and code. If you don't know who I am, my name is Corbin Brown. I built out bumpups.com. This is a full-blown software that is currently funded by Google. So don't worry, in this series, you're going to get real applicable software development knowledge with our new ability to code of artificial intelligence. And the entire purpose of this series is for individuals who have little to no coding experience. And even if you have a ton of coding experience, this still works, as AI and our ability to integrate it into our coding workflow is a whole new field. I'm not going to take up too much of your time here, as when you jump into this series, I'll probably go over what you see above me anyways, but this is a in-depth series that's been running on my channel, and I went ahead and combined it all into this one video you're watching now. So go ahead and let past Corbin explain everything you're about to see in this series pretty soon here. But one last little note. This series shows you how to build out an entire backend for a real app. I built out an entire separate playlist built similar to this for the front end of an app. Now, what's going to happen on this channel, so make sure to subscribe here, is I'm going to build out an entire playlist that shows you how to combine the front end and the back end into one real software application that I'm going to sell and show you everything. I'm going to be completely transparent about it. That's enough for me. Say hello to past Corbin. You found yourself in a playlist that actually shows you how to build out an app with a real backend. When coding in this series, I'm going to show you how to code with artificial intelligence, as if you've never coded before. We'll be using Cursor AI paired with Firebase, which will be our backend. In order for me to do this series correct, I'm going to have to break this down into multiple episodes. In this video, we're going to be setting up a React-based app within Cursor AI. We're going to be connecting it to GitHub. We're going to be connecting it to Firebase. Basically, we're getting everything ready for all the backend functions we'll run. Therefore, in this series, let me show you everything you can do with a backend when it comes to app development, and specifically using artificial intelligence to help us along the way. Next episode, we'll be setting up hosting, a real domain. Third video will be authentication, a user's ability to log in, log out. Fourth lesson will be Firestore. This is going to allow us to store data for specific users, so when they log in, they get personalized information. Fifth lesson will be functions, setting up functions within Firebase, which then translates to Google Cloud. How do you read functions? How do you understand functions? Specifically in this series, though, I'll show you how to do an API call when it comes to OpenAI, because as we know, this is a new market, and artificial intelligence integrated SaaSes are very, very popular. You're like, Corbin, how do you know if they're popular? Well, I'm currently building out my own software called bumpups.com. It's funded by Google. So anything you see in this entire series is going to be based off my experience. Coming over to the next video here, which will be storage. How do we upload images, files, PDFs, whatever it may be, we're going to use these storage functions in backends. Next will be user analytics, ability to attach Google Analytics within our software application. Following this will be payment. How do we integrate Stripe so we actually get paid? And then a really big one, which will be advertising. How do we attach conversion code in an actual full stack application? This right here is extremely powerful. This right here is what's going to get you traffic and actually be able to track it for payments, which leads us all the way to the end here, which won't be a part of this playlist and series, but we're going to be building out a full stack application of an actual software together. And I'm going to go from ground zero to ground conversions and payments of actual users. So make sure to stay tuned here for this channel. Make sure to subscribe. And don't worry, the introduction for every single one of these videos you see here are not going to be like this. I'm not going to walk through every single one again. I just want to give you an overarching idea of what's about to happen. As in reality, a lot of y'all might be coming from different episodes here. Like, y'all might have just clicked on the Firestore episode and be like, oh wait, I got to watch the first lesson to create my React app. So that's the purpose of this lesson. So hello. I don't know if you're coming from lesson 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. Houston, we have a problem. And one last thing before we jump into this video, this playlist, its purpose is for purely back-end development, which honestly seems like a very undersaturated niche within YouTube and content. Kind of makes sense. A lot of people that do content probably aren't actual software engineers. No shade. But if you want to know front-end development and everything above the board in that manner and how I approach it personally, check out this video right here, or series. Let's build a web app with AI. That goes over front-end. This entire series you're about to see right now is not front-end heavy. If anything, I'm going to give you some pointers here and there for front-end, like good use cases and how to approach front-end. But the majority of this series is purely for back-end, which I already know. Some of you are like, yes, Corbin, we need this. I don't see this anywhere else on YouTube. Okay, I got it. Let me show you how to actually build out a backend. From my understanding, I should be providing Google Docs in the description down below. If I don't, then I'll just provide a ChatGPT chat that is lasered in to help you throughout all these lessons. We're starting with Cursor AI here. Let's create a React app. Grab your coffee. You already know I got my WWDC Swift Thinking shirt. It's the OG. App development, iOS. Okay, let's jump in. First, we need to do is create a project. Our goal today is creating a React-based app. Therefore, we need to create a directory where we're going to store our code. We're going to push this to GitHub. We're going to make sure this is in the cloud, etc. Open up Terminal. Personally, I like using Terminal like its own little window here. Just type it in on your computer, Windows, Mac, whatever. Y'all could use the actual built-in version in the IDE here on Cursor AI. Come down here and hit Terminal. I just like, let me go and zoom in, y'all. It's a little small. I just like personally using it outside of it. Why do you like doing that, Corbin? Because what you'll see through this entire tutorial and series is that when we run an application with a front end and a back end, and you need your own little terminal window, we need a whole separate terminal for the front end, whole separate terminal for the back end. Like, this will make more sense of why I do this. For now, though, let's create a project. MKDIR. Let's give a project a name. So this is pretty fundamental. Don't go with something that you don't like. Put it that way. The project I'll be creating today is going to be called Actual Backend App. Sounds good. Enter. Now let's go ahead and go into this actual directory here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, y'all. In order to do that, we're going to do CD, and then we're going to go and copy this. Now, this is going to be the first thing in our cheat sheet. If you followed me during the front end series that I referenced earlier, you already know what this is about. But if you haven't, then let's go to learn together. Hit enter. We are currently in the directory where we're going to be loading our code. First major thing, copy this command. Sorry, that little Apple thing went click. Paste this command. You're going to use this a lot. This is important. You're going to run commands in this. Just make a little cheat sheet with me, okay? This is going to get a little longer as we go through this series. Let's come back here. Now we need to actually grab this folder. So we're going to say open folder here in Cursor AI. With open folder here, we're going to go to our folder here and hit open. Kind of makes sense. Great. Now that we have a directory that we can basically store our code, and we're going to get used to this area very soon here, let's go ahead and create our React-based app. The video I'm doing right now is kind of similar to a video I did in the past. Therefore, I'm going to link this resource doc in the description down below. Why I'm linking this is that some of y'all, or most of y'all, or maybe none of y'all, I keep getting comments. Corbin, the npm command is not working. Okay. You need to install Node.js. How do I do that, Corbin? Go to step 2. Follow this. This is how you install Node.js. And if you want a full in-depth video on that specific part, just go to this original video right here. Also, if you run into issues, just talk to ChatGPT. Ask it questions. Let's build our React frontend. We're going to do the line npx create react app dot. If this command doesn't work, reference that resource that I provided earlier, hit enter, let's go. Make sure you are in the actual backend app or whatever you named yours. Make sure you're in the directory. As you'll notice, files are going to start appearing here. While this loads in, my goal of this series is at the end product of this actual backend app, I'm going to give you all the code for free. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm nice. But the reason I'm doing that is because of the fact that you can reference all of this code, place it, use it, put it in ChatGPT chats, Claude chats, whatever it is, and actually get more understanding from the code itself if you want to ask further questions about it. Once we load it in, once we created it, you'll notice we get all these relevant files here. Let me walk you through some so you can kind of understand the structuring of a React app. You don't have to understand everything. Don't worry. The end goal of this entire series is I'm going to provide all this code for free so you can reference any part. You're like, how do you do the functions again? Don't worry. You're going to have the files. Okay, README is self-explanatory. That is just like what's going on with the project. Git ignore, this is going to be stuff that we don't commit to GitHub for security reasons. This will make more sense as you'll see when we set up security with the Firebase and all the relevant API keys that are associated with that project. Coming over to source here, this is going to be your front end. Right now, we don't have a backend installed because we're using Firebase. We just installed the front end, which is React. In React, you're going to render the entire application within app.js, but we're going to build out different components that we're going to input here. As I said before, if you want a full series on that, you got to check out my other stuff out. This is not a front end. This is not front end. This is just back end. When we come down here, index.js, don't worry about that too much. All this other stuff is not too important here. Coming to the public here, index.html is how it shows in your browser. So what you'll notice, like the little tab, the fave icon, right now the fave icon is going to be React stuff. If you go to faveicon.ico, we need to change that as well. Robot text, whether or not we want it to be crawled by Google, etc. But for now, this is sufficient. This is what we needed for our React application front end. Therefore, with all that set up, let's go ahead and commit this to GitHub, set up our GitHub repo, and understand how we can access this and put it in the cloud. GitHub is extremely powerful. GitHub is extremely good. GitHub is life. GitHub is love. I don't know. But the point is that you need to use GitHub. This is extremely important in software development as you're going to be able to, one, have your code in the cloud. So if your dog chews your laptop, you don't lose your code. Dog chewed your homework. Let's go ahead and create a repository here and proceed. First major thing, make sure you even have GitHub installed. Reference that Google Doc I provided below, but it's going to be brew install git. With that command, I'm not going to run it. I already have it installed. with that command, install GitHub. Great. Once that's installed here, we're going to create a new repository. I'm going to come up here to repositories. I'm going to hit new. For the purposes of this tutorial, so I don't accidentally let a key run through, I'm going to put this at private for now, but at the end of this entire series, I'm going to switch that to public so you get access to everything. For now, I'm going to do private. And just as a side note, public obviously means that if you ever do commits with your code, anyone in the world can see your code. So I think a lot of you are probably going to go private. Anyways, repository name. I'm going to make my life easy and just name it the exact same thing as the actual project itself. I'm going to say actual backend app. Perfect. Description is optional, so we're not going to do it. Add README file. We're not going to do that. Add get ignore, none. All good. Create repository. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and reference our Google Doc here so you can kind of follow along. Coming down here, what we need to do is do echo your repo, README. It's going to be our first line here. We're going to be adding the README file. Copy. Or alternatively, just copy it right there. Paste it in. Hit enter. Okay. So far, so good. Now, the next terminal commands here are going to be this right here. What I want you to do is just copy this and put it in like a notes app because we're going to have to basically paste some relevant variables into here. So copy. I'll go ahead and explain all this, but first off, we need to get our personal access token. And what this is, and then why this is relevant for us, is this is going to give us the ability to tell GitHub that we actually own this repository and actually have the ability to push commits to it. So to do that, we need to go to settings here. We're going to hit our profile name here. We're going to go to settings. In settings, we're going to scroll down here. Developer settings. In developer settings here, we're going to go to personal access token, fine-grained tokens. Once we're here, we're going to say generate new token. Here we go. Now, back in the day, we used to be able to do this with our username and password, but GitHub put in some more security measures. So we have to do this every single time in order for us to access our private repositories. Token name. I'm going to call it backend token. Resource owner, that'll be you. Not coffee fuel bump. Expiration time, I'm putting 90 days, and holy smokes, y'all. In 90 days is 2025. That's kind of crazy. We're going to go ahead and say only select repositories. Repository here is going to be the actual backend app or whatever yours is called. Now, coming down here, this is a little annoying. Kind of hope GitHub would be able to fix this. Not fix it, but just basically add a feature. Essentially, we got to open both of these and just say allow access to the max ability. So read and write, and just you have to do this for everything. So go to every single one of these tabs and give max access. It would just be cool if GitHub gave us the ability to select a button that says select all, give max access. We got to click through. First one's done. Now we have to do account permissions. Same thing. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and generate this token. First thing you need to understand is that yes, in 90 days, I'm going to have to redo that entire process. Not fun. In theory, I could have made it so the token expired like a year from now, but just giving you context. Next thing, make sure to copy this. You won't be able to see it for obvious reasons. This right here, once you leave this page, you'll never be able to see it again. So copy it, use it correctly, proceed. All right, now let me go ahead and explain what's going on here with the other parts. GitHub.com, your username. Your username is, you guessed it, your username. So for me, it's Coffee Fuel Bump. So I'll be pasting Coffee Fuel Bump right there. Your repo.git is the repo you just created, which is found right here. For me, it's actual backend app. You copy that, you paste it right there. Therefore, do that for all of them. Your username, put it there. That access token we just got access to, that kind of sounded weird. Put it right here. And then your username again and your repo again. It is preferable you just do this all as one paste. So let me go ahead and do that. Now, obviously, I can't show you the entire block here because my access token's in it. But just from the first line, you will see Coffee Fuel Bump, actual backend Git. So after some debugging, I realized that I actually didn't give full access to that token. I gave no access for the contents, which is very important. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to read and write. I'm going to save again. I'm going to update again and proceed. Therefore, if you're running into errors and it's just like, this doesn't really make sense of why I'm running into an error, I would encourage you to check out the Google Doc, ChatGPT, or just check the token itself, where you may have forgotten to give access to one of these categories. I'm going to hit update. Just in case you run into the same situation I did, all you have to do is come back to that developer settings in GitHub, go to edit, see if you're all good. On top of that, if you want to regenerate your token, you can simply hit regenerate token here. So I'm going to do that. This allows you to actually give the further expiration date. So I'll do 90. Regenerate token. Therefore, to circumnavigate all of this, I'm going to make my life easy. I'm simply just going to copy these 3 lines here. Hit copy. Make sure we're in the correct directory. As I explained earlier, paste those lines in, hit enter. We are going to be noted here for us to, and the reason it's giving me an error on it already exists is because I already set this URL as the origin. To do so, that is a line get remote add origin. For now, though, this is going to prompt you to ask for the username. Let's provide it. So for me, it is Coffee Fuel Bump. So I'm going to come up here and copy. Hit enter. Now for the password, you would assume this means your GitHub password, but no. This right here, we're going to be pasting in our token that we just created. It's a little weird in terminal. When you hit paste, it looks like nothing is there. Trust me, it is. So Command-C, Control-C, paste it in there. Now that it's pasted, hit enter. There we go. Okay, it all works now. So if I reload this, we're going to see our branch. Here we go. I want to point out this part can get a little frustrating when running into errors. So use ChatGPT, leverage that Google Doc, proceed. For now, though, we have successfully pushed this repository to GitHub. Let's just start off by doing a first commit together so you can understand how to take local code like this and a little bit of the infrastructure. So to do so, we're just going to change our README here. I'm going to Command A, delete all this, and just say new software, actually learn backend. With that done, notice a couple things. First thing, file itself changes color. Second thing, little branch down here has a little asterisk. That means that it is different than what we saw in the GitHub branch. E.g., the README looks like this in GitHub, but the README in local looks like this. There's a difference, therefore asterisks. Let's go and push this. We're going to say git add dot. Get used to these commands as well. This is something you're going to type in a lot. Git commit -m. This is going to explain what you just did. This could be anything though. But for me, I'm just going to say README change, quotation mark, boom, git push origin, and this will be the branch name. So right now we're in the branch of main. Therefore, we'll do git push origin main. This will push us to our GitHub right here. If I hit reload, boom. And then what you'll notice is that on top of that, we have the nice little branch right here. And then with this branch change that we just pushed, we can actually see what the heck just happened. So we deleted all of this and also added this little comment here, but deleted all of this. And then we added that line, new software, actually learn backend. As we continue with this tutorial and this entire series, this will all make more sense as it's going to become more natural to you. For now, this might feel like a lot, but don't worry. Over time, this is all easy or relatively easy. Once we push, it is no longer blue over here. And on top of that, it is no longer an asterisk over here. We're good. Let's go ahead and do our last step here where we're going to connect our backend. This will be Firebase to put us in good practice here. And so you can start understanding Gits and how it works when it comes to branch development. We're going to do this. We're going to do Git. Well, first off, let me just show you this command, Git branch. Add these to your cheat sheet if you want to, that little cheat sheet we made earlier. Now in software development, what you want to do is that any fundamental or just really any changes, you rarely want to work in the main branch. I want you to think of the main branch like we don't touch this. This isn't prod. This is like development. This is live. Therefore, when you make changes or do development, you're going to do separate branches. This also is really clean for code in the sense of like, what did I do right here? Oh, this was associated with the new footer branch where I just created a footer and all the code associated with the footer, at least initially, was in that branch. Early days of development, you could just keep pushing a main if it's not actually deployed. You don't have to care as much, but it's always going to be in good practice. So therefore, we're going to do git checkout -b, and give it the branch name. So for this, we'll say Firebase add because we're adding the Firebase. Enter. So now we're in our new branch called Firebase add. This will make more sense as we keep going here. All you need to know is that right now, we're good to go. You'll notice that will change down here, and we are currently in Firebase add. Let's jump over to Firebase real quick. And what you need to know about Firebase is, especially in early development and doing everything you're going to do in today's tutorials and series, you're basically going to pay no money, as that is going to be part of the Spark plan where it is no cost. This is just to get you comfortable with the platform. This gives us the ability to do Firestore functions. Basically, everything we would want to do, we can do within the Spark plan for the most part. Even if we go to the Blaze plan, that is pay as you go. There is no fixed fee. And I'm pretty sure Google Cloud has like a promotional thing where you sign up, you get $300 worth of credits for free. Let's proceed. Okay, let's go ahead and say create project. This is going to be your project name. These all can be different, but for organization reasons for myself, I'm going to name it all the same thing. So I'm going to do actual backend app and hit continue. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and enable Google Analytics for this project because I'm going to have to show you how to do some really cool stuff with that. For the account, we'll just say default account for Firebase. Automatically create a new property, create project. Here we go. We are creating an app that will actually have a backend. I know. Surprising for YouTube. Here we go. Let's hit continue. Now that we're in our actual app here, we're going to go ahead and get started. Because in today's video, we're not doing iOS, not like the WWDC. We're doing a web app. Select web app. For the web app, we're going to give this a nickname. And you can probably already guess what I'm going to give it. I'm going to have consistency in my naming here, so I'm just going to call it actual backend app. We're also going to set up Firebase hosting, but this won't be in this video. This is going to be the next video. So if you want to see that, make sure to stay tuned here. Make sure to leave a like if you felt like you learned something up to this point. Why? Because it's free. Register app. For these next steps, I'm actually going to skip it because these next steps have to do with hosting. Therefore, all I wanted to show you in today's tutorial is setting up our Firebase backend with a React frontend. So let me go ahead and show you how we deploy that frontend. And then in the next lesson here, you're going to learn how to do hosting with it. What hosting is Firebase's way of giving you a custom domain, and is actually really relevant in the context of the backend, as when we do function calls, whether that's through API requests or HTTP callables and this stuff that will make more sense, we need an actual URL rather than localhost 3000. Let me just show you how to launch this though. So we're in Firebase add, and for React apps, it's pretty simple. make sure you're in a directory and just do npm start. Hit enter here. This is going to build into localhost 3000, and we're going to see what's here rendered in a local environment. For more context, a local environment is you don't have to connect to the internet and it runs locally on your machine. This allows you to really mess around. So if you really mess up in the code, you're not breaking something significantly and you're not really like getting charged anything. Like obviously you're getting charged if like there's an AI API endpoint here and you're using it in the local, but you know what I mean. Localhost 3000 is a front-end engineer's dream. You're able to make instant changes and it get reflected in the code. Just as an example here, if I come down here to save and reload and be like, no. And then it shows up here. Idea being that we get instantaneous changes. As you'll notice later on in this tutorial or this series, you're going to notice that when we have to actually deploy to an actual application, either in QA or in prod, this would require a little bit more latency because we have to actually push it to a live server comparative to our local machine. If none of that made sense, don't worry. This will make more sense as we keep going with the series. For now, what you need to know is this is really good front-end development. This is really good for instantaneous changes and even good for local back-end development, as you'll see with the Firebase emulator. Therefore, last little thing here is I'm going to create a decent looking homepage here that we can use in our next tutorial rather than this little spinning logo, so that we can just jump into back-end logic right away. Check out that other playlist if you want to see how I do the front end. For now, let me create a nice looking front end. I am back. Went ahead and cooked this up in 15 minutes. Just a simple landing page here, features, tech stack we're using, React, Google Cloud, Firebase, GitHub, testimonials, episodes. You should watch that episode. Get started. Just a nice little CTA here. Scrolling all the way up here, just actually build backend apps using AI. Now, if you want a full in-depth tutorial of front-end development, check out the other videos. I'll walk you through some little pointers here and there of how I created this nice little landing page, with like interactive elements as well. Real quick run through of how I did this. First off, app.js. This is where we're going to be rendering most of the app. Therefore, when we're rendering the landing page or the home page in this context, I'm going to simply import it. I'm going to store files or pages that don't require authentication in a folder called unauth for unauthentication, privacy policy, terms of service, sign up, sign in, pricing page, everything of this nature. Here, I went ahead and set up my JS file, went ahead and set up my CSS file, pointer for CSS file. When using a CSS file like this, we can set a root clause here that allows us to change a overarching branding palette color that we have in the front end very fast. For example, if I want to change the section coloring and how it looks, I could go like this. Let's change it to like orange. You will notice that it will change to orange automatically. This is useful in the context of very complex files or very long files, as you will have very, very similar UI throughout your application. Therefore, you want to reference it so you don't have to put out the same color like 10 different times for 10 different CSS elements. Real quick run through of JS. So this is going to be where your logic is going to be situated, is going to be within the component. Scrolling down here, the return statement is what we see visually in the front end. What I like to do is with assets, if you do have assets, make a folder called assets, have an images folder, have a GIF folder or GIF. Once you do all that though, simply import your front end, render it so. That concludes episode 1 here. We have successfully created our React front end with its connection to Firebase. Let's jump to lesson 2 here, where we're going to be creating hosting with Firebase. If you feel like you learned something, make sure you leave a like. It's completely free. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the end here if it exists. It might not exist yet. And I'll see you in the next video. Let's connect our web application to a live hosting URL so we no longer see that localhost 3000. Welcome back, y'all. In this video, we're going to be going to part 2 here. Number 2 should be hosting. We're going to be setting up hosting with React. So we're going to go ahead and slash app stack. What we did in app stack was, as a quick overview, was we set up it in GitHub so we can access this through a Git. In addition, we set up our Firebase, which is going to be all of our backend logic. And if you just found this video, we're doing a ton of stuff here. Check out this series. Make sure you don't skip part 1, as that is where we're at right now. Therefore, let's do part 2 here. Let's set up hosting. To do so, go to Firebase, the project we set up in the first video, go to project settings here, scroll down. This code right here is what it's going to allow us to connect our Firebase to our React application. Obviously, some of it's going to be blurred out because that is sensitive information. So 2 things we're going to do in today's video. First thing, we're going to create a .env. .env is for high risk variables. You'll see how we connect that. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to connect that to our application here so we can actually deploy to a live website link. Make sure you have terminal open. Make sure you have it in the correct directory. For me, it's actual backend app. If you don't know what yours is, reference the cheat sheet we created in episode 1. For me, it's just CD actual backend app. Once we're here, we'll make sure we're in the correct branch here, which we set up earlier, which is going to be Firebase add. The first line you're going to do is you're going to need to install Firebase. So you're going to do npm install Firebase. I've already done this. Simply hit enter there. Next step, we're gonna come over here to source. We're gonna hit new file, firebase.js. In firebase.js, you're gonna copy that high-risk code I showed earlier. This code right here, simply hit copy, paste it over. Perfect. We have pasted over the code here. This is still gonna be blocked here. Let's go ahead and create our env file. Go right-click source, new file, .env. All right, let's go ahead and leverage Cursor AI, make our lives easy. I'm gonna come over here. I'm going to hit Command L, Control L. We're gonna add our current file .env. We're also gonna add firebase.js. We're gonna go ahead and say, okay, let's import .env, all relevant variables from firebase.js. Enter. This will be blurred out, but as you see, this is what we want. React_app_firebase, and then the relevant information. Copy this and paste this into your .env. Then it gave us the correct firebase.js as well. Notice how we are referencing the .env in our front end now with process.env React app Firebase API key, which we notated in .env. These two are connected now. We're good to go. We've set up some security measures. So far, so good. Come back to terminal. Before terminal, let's make sure we set everything we need to set up in hosting. We're going to hit get started. You can find this. You're going to go to build, hosting. Let's just make sure you have all the fundamental stuff required for everything you're about to see from now. E.g. npm install -g firetools. Paste that line in there. Hit enter. I've already done it. Do the same. If you ever run into issues with npm, that means, or like basically it's like, what's an npm? You need to install Node.js, which I referenced in the first lesson. Now that we've done that, a good rule of thumb, anytime you start a developing day is going to be Firebase login, Firebase logout. So first I'm going to log out because I am probably logged in. This is going to give us the ability to access our project that we created and do a bunch of cool stuff. So first off, let's log out. Then we'll do Firebase login. The relevant email that we're going to be logging into is the email that is associated with that Firebase project. Hit Y. Here we go. So make sure you have the right email associated with your Firebase project. Hit continue. We're going to hit allow. And we're successfully logged in. Based off my experience in the past, what I would suggest you to do is anytime you start a new day, Firebase log out, Firebase log in, so you don't get random errors that you're just like, that's impossible. I know I did this correct. Just start your day like that. Kind of like starting your day with some coffee. Now let's go ahead and do Firebase init. This is going to allow us to initialize hosting. We're actually going to use this same type of logic for everything else we'll do in the backend. What you'll notice is that this is where all of our backend functionalities and everything you're going to see this entire series get played out. Oh, yeah, and also, because I didn't really describe in this video, yeah, this entire series, you're getting full stack backend development. If you want front end, I have a whole separate playlist for that. For now, though, we're going to go to hosting, hit space, hit enter, use existing project. This, we're going to go ahead and do actual backend app. This is the one that we created together, and it looks like it wants us to do a separate command in the beginning. So we do Firebase init hosting, use an existing project. There we go. What do you want to use as your public directory? We'll say public. Configure as a single page app, rewrite all URLs to index.html. I'm going to hit no. Set up automatic builds and deploys to GitHub. This is not necessary. We're going to hit no. File already exists. Overwrite. We'll hit yes. There we go. We have successfully initialized hosting. Now let's just go ahead and confirm that we don't get that little glitch where it is a blank screen. And we got that little glitch. Let's fix it. Now, how do we fix this? Now, we're in a separate branch here, so we could roll back to main and be like, yo, we messed up. Or alternatively, let's go to GitHub. Notice how it's the index.html that's throwing this error. In GitHub here, we can go to the README change, which is a previous branch commit. We haven't committed this one yet. And coming up here, I'm going to hit Browse Files. This is going to be all the files found within this commit. I'm going to hit Public. I'm going to go to index.html. I'm going to hit Command A, Command C, and paste this. Command Save, and we're good to go. Use that as you will. This logic is very useful in the context that you don't want to roll back completely to a previous branch. You want to change something very minute. That is why GitHub is so powerful. And I just fixed that error. So if you felt like you learned something, make sure to leave a like. Let's keep going here. All right, perfect. So now that we have that set up, we need to do one last step here to deploy to hosting so we no longer see that localhost 3000. No more local host 3000. To do so, we're going to do Firebase deploy. Hit enter. Oh, actually, we're not going to go to that URL. We want to have some good practices here. So we want to do 2 lines. Coming back to the cheat sheet here, just for good practices, we're going to do npm run build. This is the front end. Firebase deploy. This is the back end. This is just for good practice. Run this every single time you want to deploy to an actual live link. And paste it again. This is not completely necessary, but let's just do best practices. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and gut check this by clicking that link that you saw earlier. Okay, cool. Hosting URL. Command C this. We got the error again. Let's fix it. Anytime you run into errors that are specific to deployment, you're going to be looking at adding very relevant classes such as the major app, the firebase.js, the package.json. I'll go and move y'all. See what else we can add here. I mean, if I accidentally added that, that's not very relevant for the CSS and index.html. And this should be good enough here. We're going to ask a very simple question. I show this so that y'all can do the debugging on your own rather than me just showing you a cookie cutter solution where everything works. Because as you know, with code, everything always doesn't work. All right, so here we're going to do this. Use this terminology as you will, but we're going to say when I deploy a Firebase hosting, I get a blank white screen rather than the rendered app.js. Hit enter. And there we go. It's actually very obvious what we needed to do. So we're going to do firebase.json, come down here, firebase.json, command A, command V, command save. Let's try again. We're going to do npm run build. We're going to do firebase deploy. Enter. There we go. It works now. So we got our actual backend app.webapp URL here. We got our nice little UI that we created in the first tutorial here. And we're good to go. Now, if you're like Corbin, I don't like that domain. .webapp is kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. If you release a software with the .webapp domain, let me know. That's kind of crazy. So if you want a custom domain, I show you how to do that within the school community here. It's in the description down below. Obviously, if you don't care about a custom domain, you don't have to do it. It's only 20 bucks. They'll probably go up over time. If you're interested, check it out. All right, sweet. So now that we've done that, though, let's go and commit this. We're going to add this to our Git because we've successfully created a nice little branch here for Firebase add. So git add commit. We're going to say hosting good. And then we'll say git push origin. And it's going to be the branch name. If you forgot your branch name, you can just kind of scroll up here and you'll see it's right here. Plus, you can find it at the bottom left here. There we go. So what this will do is we are then going to have in our code here, if I come back over here, we're going to have a PR, pull request. What this is like, yo, you want to add this to main? Are you sure? So for you to be sure, say compare and pull request. And then what you'll notice is that we can add more information relevant to what we did here. So if you ever need to track backwards. But if everything looks good and just for context, you can kind of see what's changed, like what's going on here. This is all the stuff we added from the previous video, or actually this branch and the other video. If it all looks good and you're good to go, or say create pull request. Better UI is if you hit file changed here, and then you can kind of scroll through the directory that you have here. You're like, all right, this looks good. This looks good. Typically, when you work in a team, you'll have reviewers over here. So I might do some videos on that later on. You can check me out here. For now, though, because it's just me, myself, and I, GEZ, we're going to say merge pull request. Confirm merge. Once we've done that, because of the fact that we don't need this branch anymore, we can just delete it. And of course, we can restore it in the future if we get scared and we're like, yo, I need that branch back. Once we do that, though, this is going to merge to main, which means that we can go ahead and go back to main and update our local code or just the code we have here. So we go git branch. And right now we're in Firebase add. We're going to do git checkout main. What you'll notice is that when you delete a branch in GitHub, it doesn't delete locally in your machine, which actually can be kind of cool. I like the old version of bumpups.com, like the old software branches, I still keep locally so I can kind of run in the emulator if I want to see them. For now, though, we're going to get git pull origin main. This is going to pull all that relevant code that we just did. There we go. You'll notice that we have the little pluses, the little minuses, etc. And for now, because of the fact that we're good to go, and if I click cursor here, we're updated here. We can go ahead and do git branch, and we're going to do dash capital D, and this is going to delete it locally from our system. Git branch dash D, branch name, boom. We have deleted that branch. We're good to go. We're in git main. We're ready for the next video. Next video we're going to do here together is going to be auth and our ability to have a user sign in, sign out. This is going to require a little bit of backend logic with the function of creation of the user with some database as well, to be honest with you. So this is going to be a more complex tutorial when it comes to the backend, but don't worry. I'll make it easy. We'll do it with AI. We'll be good. Make sure to leave a like. It's completely free, and I'll see you in the next video. No more hosting. We're done with hosting. Bye-bye. Let's go ahead and get going here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do user authentication for any type of web app that you create / software. Let's jump in. We're going to go ahead and use this user interface that we did in lesson 1 here. I'm going to have it so when the user, I'm going to have this say sign up instead of watch series. When the user clicks this, we're going to go to a sign up page. Within that sign up page, we're going to have the ability for the user to sign up with email or alternatively Google. To do this, we're going to use Cursor AI. Then we'll be using Firebase as our backend here for authentication. Welcome back, or alternatively, welcome still if you're binge watching this. We're going to be setting up auth today, which is actually highly requested. I've seen a ton of comments about this. No good tutorials. This is going to be a good tutorial. If you want to know how to set up everything that you see up to this point, which was hosting and app stack, check out the other episodes in this series. For now, though, we're going to set up auth. Let's jump right in. All right, let's come to our terminal here. If you go back to your cheat sheet, remember it's going to be CD, whatever your cheat sheet directory was. Remember for any command, do the CD and then your actual directory name. And what we're going to do is this. We're going to create a whole separate branch to this directory. Git checkout -b. The purpose of this branch is going to be authentication, so we'll call this auth. Git branch, and then we're going to do git checkout auth. Everything we add from here on out is going to be code that is relevant to authentication. And what is amazing about this entire series is that by the end of it, I'm going to have this as completely free. All the code you'll see, you'll be able to use and paste into your own project. Sound good? How do we do auth, Corbin? I don't know. I'm joking. We're going to do build here and we're going to hit authentication. I'm going to go and drag this up. And just as a side note real quick for hosting here, once you deploy to hosting, like you saw in the previous lesson, you'll see your commits here when it comes to hosting. There'll be previous releases. One very valuable thing that you should know about hosting is that if you push to hosting and you screw up tremendously, don't worry. You go to your previous commit that's maybe more stable, hit these 3 ellipses, hit roll back, and it's like within 3 seconds, 4 seconds, it'll roll back to this version. Something to keep in mind. Okay, let's go to authentication. To do authentication, this is going to require 2 major things. We're going to do a sign up page / sign in page, and then we're going to build out a actual function for it to run so the user's information gets pushed. And then on top of that, we're going to take all that relevant information of that user and save it to our Firestore database so we can start doing queries that are specific to that user. Don't worry, AI will help us out, and I'll be here. Let's do it. I just realized like everything I just sounded right there sounded super nerdy. Am I a nerd? Okay, let's get going. Get started. Once we're here, we're going to have the ability to choose a bunch of different options. For this tutorial, you'll be able to understand how to do email and Google, but basically the skills you learn now, you're going to be able to easily apply to the other ones, such as GitHub or Facebook, or I don't know why you would do Facebook. If you plan on having Facebook as a login for your application, let me know what you're building. All right, we're going to go ahead and start with Google. Actually, let's start with email. For email, we're going to hit enable here, and we're going to do enable here. And the reason we're doing this is that we are going to create an authentication process that is a passwordless sign-in. E.g., when the user signs up for our account, they only provide their email, and then they log in by getting an email from us that's like the login link. Why do we do this, Corbin? Because of the fact that at least how Firebase Auth currently works, they don't really have good structuring and security around spam emails. E.g., someone goes to your site, puts in like 10 different emails and 10 different passwords for those emails. Those could all be fake accounts. Using this method though, where it's an email link, the account won't actually be created until that link is pressed. Therefore, we circumnavigate spam. Sound good? Or unless we're cooking with spam. Hot skillet, want a crispy, get some Tabasco sauce, black coffee, save. I have too much fun with this, y'all. Add new provider, we're going to do Google. Why are we doing Google, Corbin? Because it's Google. Let's go ahead and hit enable here. I might blur that out, but for now, we're going to use our support email here, contact@webcafe.com. We're actually going to change this public-facing name to Backend is real. Because it's real. It exists. I know there's not a lot of content around it, but it is real. I'm going to go ahead and save. Save. Once we do that, we have our 2 sign-in processes. Obviously, if you want to add more providers here. Let's go ahead and do the next step. Next step here, go to Google Cloud. This is going to be part of where we do our function logic. For now, just go to Google Cloud. You can get free credits, $300. For now, I'm going to say no. Select your project. Select your organization. For me, it's going to be actual backend app. Now, from here, it wants you to set up a foundation, which you can do. And maybe I'll do a video on that. That's not really relevant for what I need to do right now, though. I'm going to hit this navigation menu. I'm going to go to API and services. So far, so good. We have a couple of different options here. But what you'll notice is we need to go to credentials. And what you'll notice in credentials is that we have a couple of things that we just created here together. I might have to blur this out. So if I do, I do. Only reason I say that's because it requires editing. I don't like editing. And no, just because I say I don't like editing videos, please don't spam my email saying you would edit my videos, okay? Okay, so for all this information, though, save this in a separate tab here. Once you're here, let's go and proceed to the next step. As a side note as well, this is actually a very relevant page when dealing with external APIs through Google's ecosystem, e.g. trying to get Google Calendar's API. If you plan on using that in the software, extremely relevant. I mean, obviously the API keys is probably where you'll create it. I may do some other videos on this in the future. Keep that in mind. For that all set up here though, we need to actually initialize our functions. Go to build. We're going to do functions. Okay, perfect. Now, in order for us to do functions, we need to upgrade to Blaze, but don't worry, this is pay as you go. You got all those credits for $300. This is all free upgrade project. Okay, so it looks like I have to actually put this information in. So let me do that. I backed up a step there because it wasn't in the correct organization. Right now, my organization is webcafeai.com. We'll just do main billing. Continue. What cafe fuel, card details. I'm going to put this information in. Now, if all that connected here, let's go ahead and actually enable that $300. So I don't have to pay. Start free. Oh, okay. Well, make sure that you do that before you put your billing in. Coming back over to Firebase, I'm going to hit reload now that we've added our billing account here. I'm going to choose main billing. Budget amount, we'll just say 50. This is basically giving me a notification of like, hey, something's happening. Something's not good. You're about to go over your billing budget. Hit continue. Then we're going to hit link cloud billing account. And we have officially gone to the Blaze plan. We're blazing. Same situation as hosting. Make sure you install Firebase tools, which you already did if you watched the previous episode. And then we're going to deploy it. Specifically, we're going to be deploying functions today. All right, get branch. Make sure we're in the right branch here. Okay, everything looks good. Firebase init. Scroll down here. We're going to choose functions. Enter. Now, what's really cool in this series is that I'm going to show you how to do this in Python and in JavaScript. For this specific function, though, which is going to be an onCreate auth. This is specific to authentication. Right now, the documentation around a Python function in this context is no good. So just for this function in our application, we're going to be doing JavaScript, but this also gives you the ability to understand how it works in Java. Java. Hit enter. Do you want to use ESLint to catch probable bugs and enforce styles? No. Or maybe for y'all say yes. For me, I don't like that. Do you want to install the dependencies? Yes. The reason I say for the ESLint thing is like sometimes you get really dumb errors that aren't actually errors. And it's like too strict. But that might be good. You can use AI to help you out if you need help there. We're installing. You'll notice that this is going to show up right above here in functions. Amazing. We have officially installed functions in our Node.js project. Let's go ahead and proceed here. And because of the fact that we will only be using one function in the context of Node.js, we'll proceed in the index.js to create this function. Now that we've installed that, let's go ahead and get the front end going here, provide this code, and then the last step we'll do here is create the backend function that's going to initialize everything. And actually, before we do that, let's go and initialize Firestore as well so we can really put a bow on this and have it so when a new user is created, we have a global doc of users, then a specific UID, unique identifier, and then the relevant docs associated with that. If that didn't make sense, don't worry, we'll jump into it. Therefore, coming over to build here, we're going to go ahead and do Firestore database. Let's create a database. We're going to do database ID as default. Choose your location. If you're in the USA, go with NAM5. This is going to be basically the best performance. Hit next. We're going to go ahead and start in test mode here, but in theory, when we launch to prod, we'll go to production mode and we'll have more security around the rules. Certain files, certain paths, certain ways. Basically, one user's information shouldn't be able to access another user's information. For now, we're going to hit create. Perfect. With this created here, let's begin. Coming back over to Cursor AI, let's create a new file. This file is going to be Google auth.js. In Google auth.js, if we come back to our Google Cloud here, or actually, we might not need to do that. Go to project or go to authentication here. Actually, what I was about to show you, you can't do. So right now, the secret, you need to actually copy through that Google Cloud that I showed you earlier. So go to your Google Cloud. This will make more sense. We're going to go to credentials here. And then in credentials, this was automatically created from earlier. Here's the two variables we need to copy over. This will be blurred out, but we're going to be copying over the client ID and the client secret. So this right here and this right here. To make our lives easy, let's go ahead and use Cursor AI again. Cursor. We want to just import our Google Cloud client ID and Google Cloud client secret in the file. Paste over. This is going to be blurred out, but all we need to do now, y'all, is we're going to hit Command L again, and we're going to simply create the env version of this. We're going to add the file of Firebase or .env. Therefore, we're going to say for the client ID and secret, let's import from env. Enter. Perfect. Go ahead and paste that code over to your .env, and then you can reference it here as so. So far, so good. To give a little bit more context of the client ID and the client secret, this is the way we authenticate the authentication process in the sense of like, do you actually own the app? You actually own the Google Cloud processing. Like, are you the owner? This is how we access it. This is how we tell Google that, hey, this is the correct app. We have access. We're good to go. Therefore, coming back over here, we're going to set up our auth, or at least import our auth and everything required for auth. Command L, include Google auth as well. Okay, we have Firebase authentication started. We need to import Firebase auth and export. We are looking to use email passwordless sign-in and Google sign-in. Hit enter. And if you couldn't tell, this entire series is on the free Cursor AI platform. This is all free. This code isn't bad, but it's trying to do the actual logic of what a sign-in and sign-out is and stuff like that. We just want to export it, so we're going to do this logic elsewhere. Therefore, I'm going to say don't want to do the actual logic. We just need to import and export all of this so I can reference in a separate file. Enter. There we go. So with this code here, we're going to just copy this line and then paste this line right here. So what we're doing here is first off, let me get rid of all these comments. We don't need comments. All right, so we are getting the ability to get auth, Google auth provider, sign in with link to email. Nice. This is coming from the auth of Firebase. Coming down here, we see that we are doing it here. So auth is get auth of app. Google provider is new Google provider, and then we're exporting this so we can use this in alternative logic, as you'll see here pretty soon. There we go. So with all this information here, let's go ahead and just change something about my front end. So it's a sign in. We'll do a separate page, and we're gonna have to do some React navigation, which will make more sense here. But for now, we are good on the auth and the imports. All right, to do so, let me come back over here. I'm gonna say sign up. There we go. Give me a couple seconds. I'll come back in 5-10 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and just create a real quick React front end for the sign up UI. If you're like, Corbin, I want to see that. I want to see how you do the front end. Watch my other playlist. It's like 3 hours and 11 minutes long. That's for the front end. This is for the back end. So I've gone ahead and created our sign-in UI. So simply click a button here and we're good to go. Either put your email there or sign in with Google. And what you'll notice is that it actually works right now, or at least in the emulator side. E.g., in the next couple minutes, I'm going to show you how to launch the Firebase emulator, which is a mock backend, localhost 4000. And this allows us to see a bunch of different stuff when it comes to later logic we'll be doing together. What you'll notice is that add new account, auto-generate information, sign in with Google, and we're at the dashboard. Let's get going. As I mentioned before, all this is going to be available on GitHub for you to copy and paste. As of now, though, I'm going to walk you through the chats that I had with Cursor AI so you can get a fundamental understanding of how this all works and how it all connects. First thing you want to do before we even jump into that is make sure that env, I accidentally created it within the source file here. Go ahead and drag it out so it is on the surface level of this entire project repository. I was running into issues where none of this data was being read, and I was like, what's going on here? Realized that I didn't create it here. So make sure you do that. You'll know whether it's in your source file or not if you close your source file and you see it there. Second thing I realized is that logic I referenced earlier in this video, which was setting up the functions and Firestore to actually save a doc associated with each user, I'm actually going to do that in the next lesson because I got into the point where we have done full-blown authentication. Therefore, if you want to see that logic, check out the next lesson where I'm going to show you how to create a doc when a user signs up, and that's going to pair with the function logic that we'll set up with the Node.js. For now, though, let's just do authentication. First off, the files we created. We already have firebase.js. We know this. We already have Google Auth. We know this. Unauth, make a sign-in page. Go ahead and proceed. Now, when it comes to good software development, you'll make a sign up and a sign in page. Those will be directed to two different URLs, sign up, sign in, obviously. What you need to know, though, is functionally when it comes to code, whether the user signs up with that Google button or signs in with that Google button, it's the same code. Same thing with the email passwordless sign in. Therefore, purely just to show you how to do auth, I'm going to do this all as one page here, but you can easily do separate. Coming into auth, just to show you what it will look like and what does the auth experience feel like, I just real quickly made a dashboard.js and .css to confirm that we are in the auth version, and all it says right now is welcome to dashboard. Don't worry, I'm going to show you all the chats of how we got to this point, so don't feel overwhelmed. I'm just trying to give you like a overview of this, like an umbrella. When it comes to authentication, the major thing you need to understand is how we render the application. Therefore, when we render the app, which occurs here, we need to have paths that are available for unauthed users, such as sign up and dashboard, or not dashboard, homepage. And then we need to have auth paths that are only available for users that are currently logged in, such as /dashboard, which what you will identify is a private route. First thing you may be asking is, Corbin, how do we know whether a user is actually authed or not? That's why we're going to be creating a separate file here called auth.context or authcontext.js. The only purpose this file serves is to confirm whether or not the user is logged in. We then use this context, import it into our app.js to then do this logic. What you'll notice is that the entire thing is wrapped in auth provider, which comes from our auth context. Basically, the purpose of auth context is like, are you logged in? No. Then you can't access dashboard, etc. Okay, with that all out of the way, before we jump into the code, you need to install two things. The first line, make sure you install Firebase, so no issues incur there. npm install Firebase. The second one is going to be the browser router. Notice that comes from React Router DOM. Therefore, we need to do npm install React Router DOM. A lot of the times when you get error codes, you'll be able to ask Cursor AI like what's going on, and it will tell you this anyways. But keep in mind, anything you import, you need to make sure you install with npm. Like another example of this is link, which is still from the same dependency, which is React Router DOM. But keep this in mind as, for example, for a lot of the UI I've done on the front end, I've installed Font Awesome. If you don't know what that is, really cool way to get free icons for your software. For now, though, kind of understand what you need to install to do the logic you're about to see. Also, for anyone wondering what link even means and how that's used, what that does is that if it's like I'm on the homepage, I want to go to /signup, I click this, notice it's not a reload, rather it's just a redirect. E.g., like there is no loading, it just goes directly to it. It's very fast component loading. All right, that's a brief overview. I know this sounds confusing, so let's walk through this step by step and how you can do it in Cursor AI. Hit Command-L, Control-L. I'm going to explain the best I can. I'm going to walk you through step by step my thought process when creating this. Let's go and proceed. First, prompt I did. Now, what you need to understand is the files to add to these chats so you get the best answers. Add firebase.json, add your homepage.js, firebase.js, authcontext.js, signup.js. You might be like, Corbin, I don't have an authcontext.js to add. Well, guess what? Go ahead and create one then. And yeah, just to create one, new file, type in a name, .js, you successfully created a JS file. The first piece of logic I wanted just to touch up on real quick is to make it so that the CTA buttons actually worked. So for this example, this was like the let's get started. I want to make sure it worked because before it just like you hit sign up and it went to a different part of the page. To do so, I wanted to use link because I'm well aware of what link means in this context. Okay, we need it so that the unauth people, also when I say unauth, that means that they're not logged in, can go to sign up and sign in page. Also make it so the button does the link to sign up. Basically, I click it, it has the sign up in the URL. Make it so the navigation exists and also set up the relevant port code for the emulator in firebase.json. You might be like, what the heck did you just say, Corbin? Basically, for us to run the emulator like you saw earlier, this is the sign up. We need to actually reference the ports. This is going to allow us to run this backend locally on our machine. And what you'll notice is that we'll get our emulators here. We'll get our auth port 9099, functions port 5001. Don't worry, put in the same exact logic here. Reference the firebase.json and then reference that you want to basically have an emulator for auth, functions, firestore, hosting, pubsub, etc. You'll see this in the UI when we run the emulator later on. Next, we need to have it so when we run our auth, it actually shows an emulation like you saw earlier when I hit sign up with Google and we're able to put in our information. Therefore, in our firebase.js, notice how it's adding this line of code right here, right above my head. Connect auth emulator. It gives us a line right here. So typically the way it seems like Cursor AI gives its outputs is it doesn't give the entire file. You can obviously request the entire file here, but what you will typically do in this context up to this point is you'll simply like copy this import line because this is all for auth and then paste it here. And then for this line right here, we need it so that when we're in the .env, it realizes that we're in the development and we're connecting to localhost 9099 connect auth emulator. This gives us the ability to make fake email accounts and a fake backend, which will make more sense later on. Also, one major fundamental thing for you to understand is that when you import here, sign in link to email, you export there. So we can use that throughout our other logic. Once we have all that information connected in the sense of being able to have the correct ports associated with our emulator, Corbin, why is it 9099? Why is it localhost 3000? These are just ports associated for the local machine. What you need to understand is this is going to be the meta prompt. This is a prompt you want to use for initially creating the relevant code for authentication. So open up a new Cursor AI chat here. We're going to do app.js, firebase.js, firebase.json, auth.context. The one you created it could be empty. It's all good. Signup.js, how we're signing up. You know, if you really don't know what to add, it's better to add more than less. But the idea here is add any relevant piece of information that has to do with auth, package.json, just everything, right? From here, put in this command. Now, of course, you can look at my repository for free in the description down below to check out how I did my code if you want to copy and paste it. So here's how we do it. And just for reference, when you write out these prompts, it doesn't have to be perfect English or perfect grammar at all. You'll notice that it's kind of jumbled, but the AI gets it. Create new files. Signup.css, signup.js. Make a simple sign-in page for now. Add the functionality of email password list sign-in and Google sign-in with redirect. Have it so I can enter an email and hit next and hit the button to sign up for Google. Import here app.js. Therefore, we need to create a new file .auth.context.js so we can tell navigation-wise whether we are authed or not. And let's go to dashboard. Therefore, dashboard.js, dashboard.css if logged in. That might sound jumbled, but the idea here is simple. Within our app, I'm going to hit enter here. While that is generating, let me explain. We need to set up this private route. And what we know is that with auth context, which the AI is smart enough to understand what that even means, we know that we can tell whether a user is authed or not, or logged in or not. So what this will start doing, and the way you know whether your code is structured correctly, is that you should have three fundamental parts. First one should be private route. This is going to tell us whether or not the component dashboard.js is authed or not, logged in or not. Once we do that, make sure you import all the relevant areas of your application. The home page, the sign up page, the dashboard. Those are being imported from here, right? So we got the home page, we got the sign-in page, and then the auth, we have the dashboard. Naming wise, notice how it says export default dashboard, which means that here is dashboard. And then the file path is /auth, which is the folder name, /dashboard, which is the file name. So from that code output you see here, just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, which gets us to the point that we see here. So right now we have the ability to render the /dashboard only if we're logged in. So let's walk through this little sandwich here. Auth provider, router, routes. What are routes? Routes are going to be the slash on the actual domain. Slash represents just the URL itself. So it's apples.com. It'd be apples.com, apples.com/signup. That's going to be the component of the signup page. And then obviously within the private route, this is what we can see once a user is authed. So let's go ahead and launch our emulator here. To ensure that you can launch an emulator, you're going to come down to firebase.json. you should see some new code here like this. If you don't, simply go to Cursor AI and be like, hey, I need to do Firebase emulator. And then it'll give you all this code. Open up a new terminal window, put in your CD actual backend app is me, and then we just do Firebase emulator start. Now, if you want to make sure we're running this to the right project and the right directory, first do Firebase project list. This is for people that may have created multiple Firebase projects, so let's make sure we're running it on the right application. And I guess I spelled that wrong. Oh, it needs an S. Once we do that, notice how the current project ID we're using is the correct one, actual backend app. If it's not the correct one, simply copy the one you want to do and do Firebase use the application name, actual backend app, whatever your name is. The reason I bring this up is that sometimes you'll run into errors that make no sense entirely. There is a possibility you need to rerun that command line there for Firebase to actually realize that you're using the correct app, etc. Just little glitches here and there. So do that before you do Firebase emulator start, which is this command line right here. You will run this every single time you want to launch your sudo backend. Click. Once you successfully run, you'll get this kind of end message here. And this is where we can see all the backend logs for a local environment. In order for us to see this, simply go to localhost 4000. If you go to overview here, you'll see every single one that's on. And how do you turn one on? As you saw earlier, we are referencing these port numbers found here that we showed in the firebase.json. So coming over to the authentication tab right now, no one's auth. No one's signed in yet. So let's walk through this code together. First off, you'll notice running in emulator mode. That means that we are currently in the correct area. Let's get started. Let me walk you through this code here for sign in. As I said earlier, the logic for signing in or signing up with an email, whether it's Google or email, passwordless, if I can speak, same exact logic. So first thing you'll notice is that we're importing all of this information here from Firebase. This is where we set up all our logic here for giving us the ability to actually do something. So once we can actually do something, coming back over to sign up here, we're going to import it because then we're going to use it. So scrolling down here, let's understand what is going on. So obviously in our return statement, we have the enter email, which you'll see in the UI here. And then we have the sign in with Google. So once they enter in the email here, if they choose to go this route, they're going to do the button of sign in with email. And then obviously coming down here, we have the sign in with Google, which is going to do the handle Google sign in. So let's do Google first. Google's easier. Command F, coming up here. Handle Google sign in. Now, what's great with AI is that you don't have to understand everything to a T. You just have to understand logically what's occurring here. So what you'll notice is that we are referencing auth that we imported up here in our Firebase, and we're referencing Google provider, which we imported here as well. Now, you have two ways of signing up with Google or signing in with Google. It's either sign in with redirect or sign in with pop-up. Now, what I've noticed is with code outputs is that for some reason, it likes putting in sign in with pop-up, which obviously means that if I click sign in with Google, it's going to give me a pop-up. I'd encourage against this just because some browsers have security measures where pop-ups are blocked. So I would opt for sign in with redirect, which means that when I click sign in like this, we're redirected to this page. So watch this. Add new account, auto-generate information, sign in with Google. We're in the dashboard. We're good to go. And then coming over here, if I reload this page, we will see it right here. We have successfully authed using Google. You'll see the provider here as well. Now let's say we want to do the same thing with email. All we need to do is obviously send link to email. If you come up here, we are doing all the email logic here when doing passwordless sign in. That is why there is no password here. So we'll just do apples@gmail.com. And as I said before, let's say someone put a BS email there. If you do password, you enable password, it will go through the system and you'll get dead records. You don't want that. So do passwordless sign up. Therefore, if a user does this and the email is not real, they're not going to be able to click that link. Therefore, they're not going to be able to actually create an account. E.g., it doesn't exist yet. There is no apples@gmail.com because it's passwordless sign-in. Therefore, once the user does have an account, though, in our emulator here, what you'll notice is that we can go ahead and test it. So this would be the email sent in the user's email, whatever they put in. There would be an email sent with the link. When testing it in Firebase emulator, we actually just copy it from our terminal. So copy the link, paste it up there, hit enter, and we're logged in. Apples@gmail.com has been identified as a real email. Now that that is all done, I encourage you to check out my front-end playlist. If none of this like React components kind of stuff made sense, I go way more in depth about importing pages and understanding what every component even means. But as a brief overview of what we covered right now, here's the TLDR. App.js is where everything in your application will be rendered. In app.js, we have two options. First option, what will show users that are not logged in? Second option, what will show users that are logged in? To identify whether or not a user is logged in, we use authcontext.js. Then we take authcontext.js and we import it to app.js. Here is where we set up the logic of private route. With the logic of private route, we're able to basically put in relevant components that will only show and display to users that are slash dashboard. And then we'll do other pages as well. But for now, that is all we have. That's the structuring of an auth application. Coming over to firebase.js, anything we need for auth, we import to firebase.js and we export out of firebase.js. Here is where we're going to import and export other stuff, functions, storage, Firestore, etc. Your sign-in page, I would encourage you to do two separate types, sign up, sign in. But all you need to know fundamentally is the actual logic to sign in and sign up are the same. What do you mean by that, Corbin? I mean that the sign in with redirect, that's used for a sign in or a sign up. The code's smart enough to know whether it's a first-time user or a second-time user or a login user. And then finally, the dashboard.js was purely just to show you an auth logged in view. I know that's probably a lot, but now you know the fundamental logic associated with auth. Use Cursor AI to help you out. Actually, one last thing, extremely important, fundamentally important. Don't forget about that firebase.json and actually putting in the ports here. If you don't do that, nothing's going to work. That covers authentication. And in the next video here, I'm going to go over authentication. And specifically, when a user is created, we're going to be able to create a specific UID so we can associate all further data with that user in any context. Sound good? I'll see you in the next video. Welcome back to the series where I'm showing you how to actually build out backends for your applications. If you're just joining me now, we've already set up our application. We've already set up hosting for our application, and we've gone as far as setting up authentication. Therefore, bye-bye auth. In today's video, we're going over Firestore and how to set that up in our backend. Now, if you want to watch the first 3 lessons here, check them in the description down below. It'll be in a playlist called like, let's set up a backend with AI. Let's jump in here and actually build out a Firestore or database for application. Up to this point in this series, we have a React application that connects to a live website link, and we have the ability for authentication, e.g., let's sign up a new user. I'm signing in through Google. Add new account, auto-generate information, sign with Google, go to a dashboard, auth context. We've gone over this. We've done this. On to the next. Before I show you how to do the next step here, let me go and just draw on the whiteboard what we're about to do here so you can conceptually understand what's about to occur. So right now, let's just say we got Bob here, and Bob's a new user, or not a new user, but Bob just arrived to the site. We have no information on Bob other than Bob is Bob. Once Bob goes to sign-in page and either signs up with email or Google, this is where we come into play and what we're about to set up today. So we got to do 2 things. First thing we got to do is we got to set up a function which sole purpose will be an onCreate. E.g., this function will only fire if Bob, hello Bob, how you doing today? If Bob is this is the first time they've ever signed up. If Bob logs in again, this function won't fire. This is a very unique function to authentication when it comes to Firebase. It'll make more sense as we get going here, but we'll have a function that fires off. And within this function will go ahead and set docs within our database associated with Bob. So we're going to have a global doc here. This is going to be called users. So I'll put you for now. Every user of our platform is going to be associated with users. E.g., we come in here, it's going to be this big collection you'll see here. With users here, then how do we identify which user is which user? So the way we're going to identify who is Bob and how we know who Bob is what authentication does for us. What's super cool about authentication, which this is in the prod version. So let me go ahead, or QA, whatever you want to call it. Let me go ahead and show you in the emulator. Localhost 4000, hit enter. We set this up in the previous tutorial here. If you go to authentication, what you'll notice is that each user that signs up gets a user UID. This is a unique identification number. This is extremely important. This is the number or the string that's going to allow us to identify, for example, this user's Grass Olive, everything associated with Grass Olive, subscriptions, personal preferences, everything, y'all. So this UID is extremely important. Therefore, when we set up our database, we're going to reference that. Coming back over to our whiteboard here, we got users, which is a generic text of users. Users will then lead into the thing I just showed you, which is going to be their UID. Their UID is going to be able to basically identify this is Bob. So user Bob has this UID. Then from here, this is where we set up docs. So this could be a doc for settings, a doc for preferences, a doc for value points that we provide them, a doc for etc. What you'll also notice is that this UID is going to come very fundamental in the sense of further tutorials we do here when it comes to functions, storage, basically everything else, right? This is how we identify who Bob is. So let's go ahead and find out who Bob is and begin this tutorial. All right, so coming back over here, we got everything set up here, but you notice we're still in the auth branch. Let me jump back over here, y'all, and let's begin here. And before we jump a little bit further here, if anything comes up during this tutorial where you're just like, what the heck's going on? I don't understand. One side thing, obviously, is that this entire repository at the end of this tutorial will be available in the description down below for free. You can copy and paste my code. Alternatively, you could use a software like BumpUps that allows you to input a video like this and actually talk to it and then get the exact terminal commands or different questions you may have during the process and tutorial that you see here today. Let's go and jump in. First off, we got to get out of this branch because we are done with auth. So I'm going to do get branch just to confirm we're in auth here. Let's zoom in a little bit so y'all don't have to zoom in. And then we're going to do get add because it looks like there's a little bit of stuff going on here because there's a little asterisk to the left here. Get add, get commit -m. We'll just say auth done for now. And then get push origin. And then we will push origin to this specific branch, which is just auth, enter. Oh no. Fantastic. This is probably due to the fact that I have multiple projects associated with a bunch of different gets, a bunch of different access. Let me figure this out. I've gone ahead and fixed that. And just in case you run into that issue, because this can be very frustrating, you're going to basically put in this line right here. And right where it says, you know, your token, you'll put your token. And to find that, go over to GitHub. And obviously make sure that the directory is the correct one. So mine's actual backend Git. Yours would be whatever yours is. So then you come over to your settings here and then you go over developer settings and then come to personal access tokens, fine grained tokens, go to the specific token associated with the project. We set this up in earlier tutorials, click it. And then here, just hit regenerate token, copy it, paste it right there. And then that should give you access back to your directory. I just know I lost access because just trust me, I have a lot of different projects in a lot of different areas. And as I referenced before, use BumpUps. That can help you out with the directions there as well. Okay, let's actually get going here. So now that we have finished that, we have pushed auth here. Let's go ahead and merge our branch here and then create a new branch for Firestore. In this video, we're going to be doing a lot when it comes to Firestore, but also functions. So this is kind of like a mesh one. In theory, the next video is going to be much more focused and dedicated towards functions, and specifically functions that we can set up using an AI provider like OpenAI. I'm basically going to show you how to actually call that endpoint of like chat completion or get an AI output within your software. For now, though, we got to make sure that we have a unique identifier for Bob. Compare and pull request. Auth done. Sounds good. Create pull request. I might have to make a whole video of just like how to navigate through GitHub to make all this look a little bit more simple. For now, though, we're good. Merge pull request. Confirm merge. This is basically taking the code here and putting it to our main. And the reason we do this is because if we really, really mess up, we want to make sure that we're not messing with the main branch, because the main branch in software development is kind of like the, don't touch this branch. If this branch breaks, everything breaks. So now that we've merged that, we can go ahead and delete the auth branch. So we're going to do get branch just to confirm that we're probably not in main. There we go. Get checkout main. And then we're going to go ahead and do get pull origin. This is going to grab the code from the cloud or GitHub, have it set to our main branch here. There we go. So what you'll notice is that we're main now. I'm going to go ahead and do get checkout or get branch -d, capital D, auth. And over time, y'all, when you start developing more, like you might be like, yo, how the heck is Corbin typing all this stuff out so fast off the top of his head? It just becomes natural over time because you just remember commands you reference. I know when I first started development, I was like, what the heck? What's going on in terminal? Don't worry, it becomes natural. For now, though, we're going to set a new branch here. This is going to be for, we're going to call this branch, which is get checkout B. We'll say new user data. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good name. Okay. we're in new user data. Always make sure you have the most recent main branch so you don't run into merge conflicts. What a merge conflict is that basically the branch code comparative to the main code, there is a major issue. We don't like those. So don't do that. For now, though, let's go ahead and set this up. Yes, I'm wearing a new shirt. It's a new day. Basically, what just happened right there is right where that just cut off, I got a Slack message from my team. And the software I'm currently developing, we're getting extreme momentum right now. We just pushed out a new update, BumpUps. That's beyond the point. Before we even get further into this video, I want to kind of give a pretext of what we're about to do right now. Two major things I want you to know. First major thing, the topics I'm about to discuss right now are pretty complex. So if you don't understand them right off the bat and you feel a little overwhelmed, that's natural. There's a lot of new information and we're straight up developing software, y'all. This isn't like we're creating a pot, okay? Like a little pottery pot. We're creating software. So if any of these concepts seem overwhelming or just like what's going on, that's natural. The second thing here, if you run into errors after this video and you hit walls, it is extremely, I've been developing since I was 12, y'all. You know what the most common thing for developers is that like is very common? It's when you get an error And you will spend hours trying to solve that error. That's natural. That's common. That isn't like maybe coding isn't for me. No, no, no. That is natural. You spending hours trying to solve an error and then finally solving it, that's how it works. And what's great is that once you solve that error, if it comes up again, you know how to solve it in the future. And last little thing on that topic, there's a little weird thing in software and coding. It must be something to do with the brain. Who knows? You get an error, you spend hours on it, you still don't solve it, you sleep on it, and then in the next morning, you'll be able to solve it in like 10, 20 minutes. That's a real thing. Sometimes you just got to step away. Okay, that's all out of the way. Let me walk you through this because this is going to be a lot. Let's jump it. So the name of the game right now is that in our dashboard, I went ahead and set up some like easy front-end code. And what this is basically we're going to be loading in 2 variables from the backend just to show you how it works with Firestore. We're going to be loading in a profile image and a user email. I'm going to show you how to set up static profile images, e.g. like stock ones. If you ever signed up for a SaaS platform like Adobe or something like that, sometimes you'll see like a little artwork for your profile. I'll show you how to do that. This is going to show you how to leverage Firestore in the front end as well. And then we're going to be setting up the function. This is going to be the big one right here. This is going to be the one that's like, if you run into errors, it's natural. Trust me. This is a lot. Let's do it. To best showcase how we're approaching this, I'm going to show you a complete file, and then we're going to do an entire file together. Here we go. Okay. First major thing you need to know. Right now, when it comes to Google Cloud Functions, there is V1 and V2. Typically, we want to opt for V2 as it is better for software development. E.g., as you see here with the /V2, and specifically this function here, which is an HTTP request. Basically, we're sending data to it, and then we'll receive data from it. That's fine. That's all good. There are certain functions that you can only run in version 1 of Google Cloud. And one of these functions is going to be our onCreate one, which is functionsauth.user.onCreate. This is non-negotiable. This has to be a V1. And we have to use a very certain version of Firebase. Why, Corbin? Because it doesn't work in V2. This function is a Gen 1 function only. If you don't know what Gen 1, Gen 2 is, just put it this way. Everything past this is going to be Gen 2. We're going to be making a whole separate folder that's going to be Python-based, all Gen 2. We want to go that way, but we are obligated to use first gen when it comes to just the function that it fires only once when a user signs up. There is a ton of implications behind what I just said there. So let me just walk you through some steps here. I'm going to walk you through some commands that you may need to run or may not need to run. Just depends. I know that sounded a little weird, but trust me, when you start doing this process, you're going to come back to this part of the video and be like, okay, maybe I should run that one, maybe I shouldn't, etc. That is why I prefaced a lot of this, because don't worry, we all run into errors. First major thing you need to know. When we do a first gen function like this, we need to ensure that we're using the correct version of Firebase in our package.json found in our function folder. E.g., your dependencies here, which is Firebase admin and Firebase functions, we'll zoom in, needs to be 5.1.1 for Firebase functions. But Corbin, this isn't the most up-to-date version. I want to use 6.0. I want to use 7.0. Or whenever you're watching this video, maybe 10.0. Or maybe by then they actually fixed this issue for second gen. But beyond that, no. Trust me. Use that one. If you don't trust me, then go ahead. Update Firebase functions to the most recent version, and then tell me how it goes. That's the first major one. Obviously, when approaching this, explain this to ChatGPT, Claude, Cursor AI. That is what needs to happen so you get the right commands. But here is the command that you need to use here. First off, just manually put in 5.1.1. I want you to do cd function. This is going to put us in this function folder here. I then want you to put the command npm uninstall Firebase functions, and then we're going to go ahead and save the new version. We're going to do npm and then ignore the 5.01 to make that 5.1.1. We're going to do npm install Firebase functions, that, save. To verify you did it correctly, you're going to do this next command. npm list typically is just like, what's the data showing? Firebase functions. There we go. You should see something like that. If you see that, you're on the right track. So now that we're on the right track here, we're using the right version of Firebase functions, and you just learned something new today. Using the most up-to-date dependency on every single dependency you install. When I say dependency, this is like external stuff you use in your application. Like during payments, when we install Stripe here, it's going to show up as a dependency. So realize, sometimes in more up-to-date versions, stuff just doesn't work. That is why specifically in the code we're creating today, and that is why we're only doing one function within Node.js, because this doesn't work with Python, and this only works with Gen 1. If you feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, trust me, there is a ton of forums on this topic, and no one seems to get the answer right on this. Okay, beyond all that though, this is how we do it. So I put in this like HTTP function second gen just to give you context of how we reference V2 in Node.js. For us though, we're not going to be doing V2s in JS. We're going to only be doing this one, Gen 1 in JS. Don't worry, I'm going to show you line by line how we do this. But first off, let's just deploy it and just read some of the logs here. I'm going to give you some troubleshooting abilities. So first off, let's go back to our head directory here, which would be the head of the app. Now that we're here, obviously Firebase log out, Firebase log in, make sure you're using the right project, etc. If you want to know you're using the right project, Firebase projects, list again. You'll start learning these little terms. Actual backend app, we're using the correct one. Okay, perfect. Let's keep going here. And we'll set up this index.js together here. But now that we've done that, just to show you some debug logs, we put in a line here, Firebase deploy. When I do Firebase deploy by itself, this will deploy hosting, Firestore, functions, whatever you have in your application, it'll deploy the entire Firebase. Because we only care about functions right now, just do Firebase deploy only functions, which is self-explanatory, hit enter. So what this does is this is going to create the two functions you see here in our Firebase, where we have hello world on user create. If I come over to my Firebase here, I go to functions, you'll see that they exist here. There we go. And you'll see that they're updating in Node.js, second gen, first gen, etc. If you want to learn more about that, just type in Firebase, second gen, first gen difference, or Google Cloud Functions difference. You'll be able to get a better context on that. But like with anything, it's like iPhone 10, iPhone 11, or I guess the better way of putting it is like iPhone 8, iPhone 12. Obviously, when the number gets higher, it's probably better. In most contexts, obviously here we have to use first gen. When running deployment, especially the first time you do this, it's going to take a little while as it's like a cold start. When you build out full-blown software and you have really big applications, this is kind of like a running joke. When you're pushing to QA, QA is like staging environment. It's a duplication of your prod environment. Production is what the user sees and user plays around with. QA staging is like what you play around with, but like as similar to the production environment as possible. This will make more sense when I do the other playlist where I actually show you how to build a software from start to finish. The idea is that when you deploy like this at very large applications, it can take some time. It can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I know software engineers that it takes like 30 minutes. So keep that in mind. I mean, early days, don't worry, it'll be fast. So once we do that, deployment complete here, you'll notice if we come over here, obviously it will show up right here and we're good to go. But you're going to run into some issues. Trust me. Let me go ahead and give you some troubleshooting ways you can troubleshoot this. What this will do is that if you get issues, it will throw errors here. Some errors are just like, don't even worry about it. Example, like unhandled error cleaning up build images. This gets relevant, obviously, when you start building on an application, but this is the early days. We just need to get going here, right? So let me show you the first one that you want to use if you run into an error. You'll get an error here, but there may not be a lot of context around that error. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do Firebase functions log, ;log. No, not like the ants on a log, like the celery with the peanut butter and the raisins on it. Okay, maybe not. Maybe that was just a me thing. Hit enter, and what we'll do here is we're going to get the entire log of that deployment. I know this looks like a ton, and you're just like, Corbin, what the heck? I'm not going to read all that. Don't worry. I'm not either. So we can just go ahead and just drag my cursor here, copy this entire thing, and then put that into a cursor AI chat, put that into a ChatGPT chat, and then simply ask like, what went wrong and how can I fix this? Give a little bit more context. I'm using Firebase. I'm trying to deploy Firebase functions. This is the first time I'm deploying Firebase functions, etc., etc., etc. First troubleshoot. Let me help you out here. There is going to be a chance here when you deploy, you're going to get an error message that is relevant to a specific service account. So if I come back here to Google Cloud, as we set up in the previous tutorial here, you're going to come up here to these three hamburger, and we're going to go to IAM and admin. What you need to understand about Google Cloud and what's happening in Google Cloud is, I would say like 80% of what you need to do when it comes to the backend, we have a nice little user interface with Firebase. It just looks nice. But sometimes you do got to come back to Google Cloud here, as there will be certain things that need to be set in order for things to work. So one of the big ones is IAM and admin permissions. Another thing that you will get very comfortable with is, actually, I can just show you through here. So let's say I'm in a function here, we run an error, we're like, yeah, what the heck just happened? We come up here to these three ellipses and we hit view logs. You'll get comfortable with this view as well. What you need to understand about this is think about this as like the debug or the console log on a computer, or what am I saying? How do I say this so simple? Okay, so basically it's like when you hit expect, and then for the front end, when you go over here and you go to console, this is like the front end version of that, but the back end. That didn't make sense. Watch my front end series, but the idea is like we're going to get messages here of everything that's occurring with the function for debugging purposes and also just seeing your function run. Y'all know that though, the error you may face, so once you put in that terminal command for functions log, if it says something around the realm of, let me go and zoom down, y'all. You're like, Corbin, what are you doing? You're too big. My bad. Let's scroll down here. So if it says something, it may not. And that's kind of the beauty of software, right? But basically, there's going to be a high probability chance here that it's going to say something along the lines of this is going to be your project number and compute and then developer.gserviceaccount.com. If it says that doesn't have access to XYZ thing, you're going to come to this Google Cloud. You're going to go, I can't say that. I am an admin. You're going to do grant access. And then you're going to paste that line. I'll just go and do it with y'all real quick. So for example, copy this. This would be showing up in your logs. You want to just have it here. Or if you do have it here, then just add these roles, right? So you can hit grant access here. There we go. And then the two roles that you are going to need to give access to is going to be editor, and then the log one. I'll be honest with y'all. I've done software development for different applications in the past. I know and I'm aware that the editor role is relevant here, but I was getting one that was requesting me to put the logs writer as well. So I went ahead and just did it. This is hit or miss. You may need to do it. You may not. Proceed. Once you've confirmed that you've done both things here, I'm going to give you some general ways of approaching this so you don't get stuck in loops of AI, get frustrated, and you're like, you know what? I'm done. First thing, this line right here. Functions.auth.user.onCreate async user. You may get an error that throws can't read user. Don't understand what user is. What does this mean? Let me see if I can get the exact error message. Cannot read properties of undefined reading user. Oh no. That has to do with the fact that right now in your package.json and the way you're approaching this, there's two things that may be occurring here. One, you're not using node 18. Alternatively, you haven't actually done Firebase functions at that version. If either of those two are not correct, then you're going to run into that error. I'm realizing in this series, probably the more valuable stuff is going to be me telling you how to troubleshoot errors rather than just giving you the code, right? Like in a lot of tutorials like this, it'll be like, oh yeah, here's the code. Have fun. No. That's definitely not the way you want to get taught on this topic, especially when it comes to coding, because it can get very frustrating. We are good to go. And what you want to do is what I suggest you to do is I wouldn't even run this on your first go. To comment out, it'd be either control. Actually, I don't know it on Windows. So if you know it on Windows, let me know in the comments down below. But at least on Mac, it's command, and then you get a little slash here. This will comment out all the code, and we're good to go. E.g., as in this won't actually be run, and we'll only run hello world. If I were you, and I'm just approaching this, I would just start with this. Hello world, functions v2, import this, start with this. Why? Just get one function deployed correctly. How do you know if it's deployed? Come to your functions here. If you see it there, there's no red. Okay, you're good. You got one. Now comes the next one, which is the onCreate, which is the actual one we care about. Then try that one. Another little pointer here when it comes to deploying is that when you do deployments, especially if you do Firebase deploy, basically the way that it works, in order to ensure that when the application gets bigger, you will deploy faster, is that if there is no changes associated with the function itself, it's going to skip it. So I believe it'll show it in this example. So it should skip hello world here, but because I add, like an S to the comment, it's going to redeploy that one. So this is very useful in the sense of maybe you want to redeploy it, but you don't want to change any of the relevant code. Just add a comment, add an S, just do something. And then what you'll see here is that it should skip hello world, but then redeploy, generate, or create new user. So I guess it didn't skip hello world. But the point being is that if you see that there's a little purple text where it'll say it'll skip the function. If you want to make sure it doesn't skip the function and actually redeploys it, just add a comment. Comments in this context, or when you do two slashes here, this is stuff that the program doesn't actually read. This is for you to read. Perfect. Let's go and do it then. So all we really need to do, what we need to do is we're going to Command L here. And I'll be honest with y'all, Cursor AI might not give us the correct code because what happens here, these AI models will opt for the most upgraded version of these dependencies, e.g. 6.0 here, because they're just assuming that the most upgraded version is the best way to go. Therefore, you're going to run into issues where you run into loops. And that's kind of some of the pitfalls of AI when it comes to more tricky situations. We're going to go ahead and try this together. If it's bad code, I'll tell you how to fix it. We are doing a Gen 1 function here. We want to do a onCreate function that when a new user is created and we set the database, their email. I know my English is not perfect in this context, but AI understands. So here we go. I'm going to copy this, paste it over, and then let's play around with it. This code isn't horrible, but there's a couple things missing. First thing that's missing is an async. This allows us to make sure we set all the docs within our onCreate function, so when the user loads in, it isn't bad, e.g. no data. But this code, for the most part, gets you where you want to be, right? So we're using the right Firebase functions. We're using admin here. This is always important. Typically in code, we're going to do an admin.initialize app. This is relevant. You're going to need this line. This isn't just me playing around. 100% need that line. And then from there, what you'll notice is that in the test file here, everything's set up perfectly. And we'll just bring it over. But this is just so I can write it out for y'all. Make sure you do, cross your T's, dot your I's. Everything is set perfectly except the fact that we don't have an async here. So make sure to add that async here. This is very relevant. For the other parts, though, we seem to be pretty solid here. Now, if you're wondering, basically, how the heck does it know what the UID is or the email? The way this works is since it's natively integrated with Firebase auth, what we did in the previous tutorial here, user.uid is a specific variable that's able to grab during the creation of that user process. Same with user.email. That exist. This isn't like where is it coming from, Corbin? It's just coming through the authentication, and because it's natively integrated, makes our lives a lot easier to do this kind of function. So now that that's done, and as I said, at the end of this tutorial or end of this series, you have all my code in that little Git repository in the description down below. It's not there yet. Okay, I haven't finished yet. From here, though, let's do it. I'm going to go ahead and delete this second gen function here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to keep it so that when I do share this code, y'all can play around with V2 here in the context of Node.js. I'm just going to comment it out because I don't need it. For now, though, we have a couple things. So console log obviously is going to show us consoles within the Google Cloud console / in your emulator. And then obviously we're going to have an error, which is a catch error. So if anything goes bad, we know what's up. Now that we've done this, though, let me go and describe this. This right here will make a lot more sense once I do one test run with you. But for now, all you need to understand is that there's going to be a global doc, like I described earlier, users. Then we're going to do specifying it by the user's UID. This allows us to give very specific data to that user. And then we're going to set a doc called user profile. And then within user profile, we'll do profile image, user email. I'm going to show you a little bit of storage play here. From here, though, this is where we can set up other docs. Maybe there is a doc you want other than user profile, user settings, other than user settings, XYZ, whatever's relevant. These are the docs that we initialize on user creation. These are docs that are relevant to our program. Basically, if a new user signs up to your software and you're only setting the user email and the user's profile image, there's a chance that you're not optimizing the way you approached Firestore in the context of, obviously, if you're providing value as a software, you need to provide value points, data, stuff that the user cares about. Okay, let's just go ahead and run through this so this makes a little bit more sense. Let's start the emulator. As we saw in previous tutorials, it's going to be Firebase emulator start. Enter. Emulator is running. We're good to go. Anyone that's facing issues with that, go to your firebase.json here, scroll down, make sure you have emulator ports identified. Now that we've done that, though, we're officially launched. You should see Firestore emulator on. You should see functions emulator on. Okay, let's get started. Sign in with Google. Add an account. Sign in with Google. Right now, it's going to be an error because we haven't set up the logic past this. But what you'll notice is that, as we did in the previous tutorial, we have auth. And then on top of that, in our Firestore, look at that. This is pretty cool, y'all. So we have the global doc of users. All users will go here. Then we have the unique identifier for that user, Bob. I remember Bob. And then we have a doc that is created through that function right off the bat. User profile, profile image, user email. Now, in theory, you probably want to do this as a map. You'd want to do this as an additional doc in order for storage reasons. But for now, I'm just trying to show you what's going on here. So now that we've set up this, and basically how this works is that, in theory, if I sign up again, we could either sign up as orange or a new account here. Watch this. Boom. There we go. New account, new UID. Now let's make this work. Yeah, everything looks good here. We're going to close this. And what you'll see in the next tutorial here is we're going to create a whole separate backend folder, but it's going to be in Python. And it's going to be for the purpose of functions we actually run throughout our application. And that is also why I said earlier of like, well, if you're going to do an on create and create documents for a user on the first time, you'll probably have more than just user profile depending on your application and your use case. Maybe not. Coming over to our Firebase.js, we got to do a couple things. First thing, make sure that with the Firebase Firestore, for now, just go to import these. Get Firestore, doc, get doc, connect Firestore emulator. Once you have those, we're going to initialize them for the entire project. So we're going to come down here and do const db get Firestore app. And then we'll make sure that we reference this. This line's extremely important. If you don't put this line, nothing's going to work. Connect Firestore emulator. At least nothing's going to work in the emulator. DB localhost 8080. Once you have all that set up, remember the rule of thumb when it comes to this Firebase.js file is that whatever you import up there, make sure you export down there so we can use it throughout our application. Other than like connect to Firestore emulator and connect to auth emulator, don't need to do that. Okay, step one is down. That also means that if, for example, we do another piece of logic here in the future, such as on snapshot, or do on snapshot here, comma, I would export on snapshot here as well, so we can use it in our application. For now, step 1 is done. Step 2, we need to make sure that we have Firestore rules that are within our project. Right now, they exist in Firebase. If I come to my Firestore database here and I go to rules, they exist here, but they don't exist in our project yet. So let's make sure we do that. In order to do that, we're going to do the lines of Firebase init Firestore. Firebase init Firestore. Hit enter. Now, I don't have to do this completely, but you will need to do this. All you need to do is hit enter, enter, and then all that is going to do is create a file down here called firestore.rules. So enter. This is asking me if I want to overwrite the file that currently exists. I would say no here, but for you, you just hit enter, enter. You're going to go. Once you have Firestore rules here, here are some example rules you can copy if you want to do so. Basically, what I'm doing here is basically giving the user the ability to access their documents if they choose to do so. So we're doing users, their UID, allow to read, write, etc. More context here, just simply highlight, Command L, Control L, back to ChatGPT, Claude. So once we do that, though, we need to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and just Control C, I'm going to get out of that real quick. What I suggest you to do, just for good practice, is going to deploy these Firestore rules. So do Firebase, deploy only Firestore rules. Just get them deployed. For now, though, they should be showing up in our emulator. And what we can do to test that is if I come over here, I'm going to hit Control C, I'm going to hit Firebase emulator start. And then in order to ensure that they are working in our emulator here, if I come down to Firestore rules right here, let's just say, let's go and do this real quick, y'all. Say we got this right here. Let's get it fully loaded up real quick. What we should see here is that when I make a change here and hit save, we should see like Firestore rules updated. So if I do this, add S here, there we go, rules updated. If you see that, you're on the right track. Perfect. So with all that set now, let's go ahead and jump over to dashboard.js, explain a little bit of this code. When referencing the ability to get data from Firestore and the database itself, we're doing doc and get doc. This is going to allow us to reference the doc itself. When I say doc, this is like little data points. Get doc is actually trying to grab the data from said doc. We can also set docs. We can also have it so it's an on listener. So if there is a change in the document, then we do something different in the UI. Sign out, self-explanatory. We're going to have an entire button that is purpose out of auth is to sign out the user. So to show you what this looks like, I'm going to come over here to the emulator, and then I'm going to simply come over to Let's Get Started here. Sign in with Google, add account, and here we go. So once we log in, welcome to dashboard, we have the specific user's email from the database, and then right now I just have like 10 random quotes that just cycle through every time you log in. And then if you hit log out here, we're logged out. Hit it again, sign in. Remember, this is specific to the user. Therefore, we should see Auto Raccoon, really random Google, I know. Auto Raccoon's email show up again. Click, pretty good. Now let's go ahead and set it up so we get an image here. And let me explain a little bit more here. So if I hit inspect here, make console, before we do that, what you'll notice is that I have this entire console log associated with the user's data. So I'm gonna make this make sense a little bit to you as well. So where this is coming from is if I come over to our code here, scroll up, I'm doing a console log of current user. This is all the data associated with the user. So we can grab everything we'd want from that user, but all we're grabbing in this context, all we care about is our ability to reference the users doc. Users, global users. I'm going to be saying users a lot in this video. Firestore, that's that doc right there. Okay, so global users, oh, UID. So what is the specific UID? User UID. Okay, so we're in this path now. We're in the specific user ID path. Okay, what do we want from the specific user then? Oh, we want the profile image and the email. So we're going to reference this doc now that we just outlined here. We're going to get it like this. From here, we're going to go ahead and say user data. How do we know if the data exists? We're going to say data off the user profile, referencing that data point. And then when we reflect it in the front end of the UI, we reflect it with the actual data points names, e.g. user profile dot profile image, user profile image, user profile dot user email, user profile dot user email, Auto Raccoon. Two major things you need to know about that. First major thing, this is not optimized logic. Optimized logic in this context is that we would use some form of a local storage where, e.g., we would store data on the user's browser so that every single time a user loads in, we're not doing Firestore reads, which can burn cost at scale. Basically, you want your application to communicate with the backend in any context as limited as possible, because this is what causes cost when you have a lot of users. Imagine you load in a user's profile, Firestore reads 20 different data points. Scale that up to 1,000 different users loading in their user profile, 20,000 data points being read. Scale that up, 10,000 of those users or 500 of those users reload their page, gets read again. Local storage is key. I'll have to do some videos on that. Let's put a bow on this video though by showing you how to get a profile image, which will kind of allude to our tutorial here when it comes to storage and what storage means. So coming over to index.js, we're going to set up some logic here where we're going to randomly select different images. This is a little fun. Let's go ahead and get some images. All right, to get these play around images here, let's just create 2 profile pics, cat or dog. I'm going to say, give me a goofy looking dog. I'm going to do square, enter. Need to add it again, enter. Okay, I guess that's against their policy guidelines. I'm not too sure why. Okay, give me a dog on a surfboard. Let's try it on a surfboard, like a profile. So we're going to go ahead and go with square aspect ratio. Give me a dog on a surfboard, like a profile picture. Send. Idea here is that obviously we can give the user the ability to upload their own profile photo, but any good SaaS product typically has a filler profile photo that is on brand. Let's go with this one. And then from here, we're going to do the same thing, but we'll do it for the cats. Hit cat. Cat. All right, we'll definitely go with this one. Got our profile pics. Let's rename them. Come back over here. We're going to go to build. We're going to go to storage here. In storage, we need to get started. So we're going to go ahead and just say starting test mode. Next. Done. Typically, if you're in the USA, you want to use NAM5 because it's the central of the USA. So we give the most optimized way of accessing functions to the nation. Once we do that, let's go ahead and just create a folder here. We'll say default profile. And if you feel like you've learned something up to this point, make sure to leave a like. It's completely free. And we'll keep going here. Default profile. I'm going to go ahead and add both those images. So once we have these uploaded here, you'll notice that I called one the cat profile and then one the dog profile. Let's go ahead and set up some logic here so we automatically choose one for a new user. Now, storage has security around it as well of who can access what. This is relevant for SaaS development, but for now, just to show you logically how it's done, simply click this little URL right here for both. Okay, so now we have both here. You'll notice it's associated with our actual application. Let's jump back over to the code. Here we go. So in order to do that, all we need to do is simply provide a variable that's going to be choosing between these 2 different images. So the entire URL here, and then we're going to use a const here that's going to identify which one we choose. So random profile image, which we'll then put here, and this will set the user's profile image. Let's see if it works. And also logically, all you need to do is this. Command L, or I guess I could have just selected the file. So let's just select the file. Simply provide both URL of images here, and then just say have it so for profile image, we randomly select between these 2 images, and then you should get very similar code to what I just received here. Let's see if it works. It's very simple. Are we a dog or are we a cat? Let's get started. Sign in with Google. New account. We're a cat. All right, just to show you how this works here, though, is so we have cat, panda, panda. Therefore, if I log out, that is unique data to panda, panda. What you'll notice is that it isn't going to switch to dog, right? This is data that's already set with that one off. Go to panda, panda. There we go. Cat, email. Let's go ahead and see if we can find a dog one, though. We'll sign up with a new account here. New account, sign up Google. And we got a dog one off rip on the second one. Perfect. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. John Lennon. Okay. Cool. Let's see this in its completion. Quick side note for Firebase emulator here, you'll notice that console logs that we put in our code, e.g. new user created UID right there, show up here as well. Useful to use if needed. Last thing, when testing and developing, sometimes you can get too much data, get a little overwhelmed. What I suggest you to do is go to your emulator here, hit Control-C, and then just simply restart it. This is going to refresh all this data here, start on ground zero. This video is going to be long. I can already tell from how many segments I've recorded. This might be over an hour. I doubt it. Probably like 50 minutes, 40 minutes maybe. All right, let's connect the dots. We have successfully made it. So when we sign up, sign in with Google, add a new account, generate information, make an account, this creates a user with unique information such as their email, a uniquely selected profile image that is reflected in our Firestore here with user, unique identifier, user profile, profile image, and user email. Therefore, from start to finish, we now have the ability to have users authenticated with accounts, and on top of that, create unique specific data associated with that user. So if Chicken Raccoon logs out, Chicken Raccoon logs back in, we got the same data. That completes this lesson. This was a long one. I know there's a lot of stuff going on here, but this gets you pretty far into creating a software application, at least in the sense of authentication, which is very important in the context of software, as giving unique information to each user is kind of the whole point, unless you're building something else entirely different for a whole entire different process. Make sure you leave a like. It's completely free. I'll leave more information down below. And as I said at the beginning of the video as well, check out bumpups.com. If you run into issues as well, you can put in this entire video and you can get like step-by-step directions on how to solve issues, what I went over in today's video, etc. Sound good? Next video will be going over functions, leveraging API, specifically artificial intelligence API, to get some AI outputs. Let's jump to the next video. Let's learn how we can use artificial intelligence to code out Python-based functions that leverages OpenAI's API. Welcome back to the series where I'm showing you how to actually build out a backend. And in today's episode, we are checking out functions, OpenAI, actions. This little yellow box. Therefore, up to this point, we've already set up our Firestore database. We've learned what a database is. We've learned how to leverage databases, and we've learned how to connect them in our Cursor AI app. Does that sound good? Bye-bye. I'll make sure I'll link the playlist down below. As you already know, or maybe you don't, maybe it's your first video with me. My name is Corbin. I'll be providing all the code at the end of this playlist in a nice little Git repo that you can just copy all the code. In addition, there's a little playlist dedicated to this. This is lesson 5. I'm showing you from 0 lines of code, absolute scratch, absolute nada, how to actually code out a backend and how to actually code out an app, leaning on artificial intelligence, because in theory, this playlist could have existed 10 years ago, but that's boring. I don't like that. Let's actually code with AI and let AI do all the heavy lifting. Therefore, in today's video, we're going to be going over functions and specifically setting up a function leveraging OpenAI's API. Now, what you're about to learn in today's video can apply to any type of function. For example, this isn't just OpenAI's API. This could be Claude's API. This could be you connecting to Gmail's API, connecting to Outlook's API. Whatever it may be, you're going to learn best practices here when it comes to setting up Python functions for an application. And if you don't even know what a Python function is, put it this way. When a user signs up for your software, this is what's going to provide the value. As the front end just makes stuff look pretty, but the back end actually provides the thing that's going to make you money. Okay, let's jump in. Here we go. We are in our project here that we set up in the last 5 lessons here. We're going to have to set up a new folder here in our functions. This is going to be a purely Python-based folder to handle this kind of workload. Now, before we do that, though, let's go ahead and set up a couple things. First off, navigate to your directory or where you've been building out this application. For me, it's actual backend app. Do npm start. Let's go ahead and have the front end load. E.g., this is the front end. We're in localhost 3000. We're going to go there. Now, let's create a new terminal window here where we're going to set up the backend or Firestore emulator. This is our fake pseudo backend, kind of like localhost 3000. This is like localhost 4000. This allows us to do backend functions, but not actually have it in the cloud. But I shouldn't have to explain this, as we've already learned this. But I like repeating stuff, as that's how you learn, right? Repetition. So we got in our CD here. This is the actual application. Let's do Firebase emulator start. With that command in, we're going to launch our localhost 4000. Right now it's loading up, so we'll get this nice little message here saying nothing exists, but it does. Just wait. There we go. From here, this is where we set up all of our backend logic, and we can test in a bubble environment. We've already set this up. We learned how we set this up. Therefore, let's go ahead and set up our function today. Come in over to our JS functions folder here. This is where we created the specific function of onUserCreate to create a new authenticated user. To put this more simply, let's walk through an example. I'm in my local environment here. I hit let's get started, sign in with Google, add new account, auto-generate information, sign in with Google. It is not found. Now it's found. We're good. Just a little bit of latency there. We go to Firebase emulator. We come over here. We go to Firestore. You'll notice we got a new doc, users, UID, and then the information here. We get the user profile image that we learned how to set up in a previous tutorial, which is a random situation here, a coin flip. You're going to be a dog. You're going to be a cat. And then we got the user's email, allergy orange, and then come over here, allergy orange. Now, if you were wondering what that little error was where it says like, user doc was not found, that's because of the initialization of the underlying variables we're getting set on that first run. E.g., users collection didn't exist. But on that first run, we had to create it. Therefore, there was latency. So for example, if I were to run this again, we wouldn't run into that issue. Log out. Let's get started. Sign in with Google. Add new account. Auto-generate information. Sign in with Google. And there we go. Loaded in perfectly. So now that we're here and we're caught up to what we've done up to this point, let's deal with OpenAI's API. And for people that are binge watching this series right now, and they're like, Corbin, I already saw that. That was a previous lesson. I get it. But the end of this is going to be like 4 hours long. So some people are going to come in and out and maybe want a real quick reminder of what we did previously. Regardless, here we go. So we're going to our Firebase app here. We're going to go to functions. We need to set up a new function here. And the purpose of this function will be the API. So right now we have the onUserCreate. Looking nice. If I come over here, we're going to have to initialize a new folder. This will be Python based. Actually, before we do that, since we're in this branch called new user data and we're finished with this workflow, we should do the big commands here. So we're going to do git add just to clean up this branch, git commit -m, cleaned go, good to go, git push origin, and it's going to be the branch name again. And here we go. New user data. There we go. And then what we can do here is we're going to do check out main. We're going to do get branch again. So then get branch. If you're like, why are you going so fast? Watch the other lessons. We already did this. Dash D, and this is going to delete the local branch we don't need anymore. There we go. If we come over to main here, we are going to go to our GitHub. In our GitHub, we're going to do compare and pull request. Create pull request, and this is everything we already did in the previous lesson. So we're going to do merge pull request, confirm merge, delete branch. Okay, we're merged with main. Main, as you know, is the branch we want to keep safe and don't want it to blow up. Therefore, we're going to do get pull origin main to grab the merged branch that we just did there. There we go. Looking good. Now let's go ahead and create a new branch. We're going to do get checkout dash B, and then the new branch name, since we are creating an OpenAI API oriented function, we'll just say AI function. There we go. Good branch. All right, sweet. Now, before we actually initialize our underlying folder here, let's create some UI in the front end that's going to basically allow us to manipulate and do actions. So coming over here, we're going to do something very simple. As my purpose is just to connect the dots, and then you'll do the creative stuff, okay? So all I'm going to do in today's video is I'm going to create a little input box here that hits submit. We're going to put in a prompt that's going to feed back to our API. Then we're going to get a response and view it here as well. Therefore, connecting the dots between a front end and a back end and a full stack application. So let me go ahead and listen to some Swedish House Mafia. I'm going to create this little front end change. We'll keep going. And as a side note, if you're like, wait, I want to see you create this front end change, that's not the purpose of this series or this playlist. That is an entirely different playlist I have on this channel of let's build out a front end. We're trying to build out back end. Back end is all that matters right now. I'll see you soon. So we are back. I'll go ahead and give you a real quick update on all the user interface and what I basically established so far. The idea that I'm doing here is I'll put in a prompt like, hello, how are you? I'll hit submit. And up to this point, it's going to store the data of the user's prompts, as you can see here. Specifically, this is going to store this within Firestore here to the specific user's UID here, and then an array of prompts. Hello, how are you? E.g., every single time I log in as Otter Olive, I will always see this. For example, log out. Coming back in as Otter Olive here, there we go. They show up again. So this isn't stored in the user's browser, rather actually stored in our backend in our Firestore database. So now that we have this and we have our nice little UI, let's walk a little bit through the code. This box right here, I'm importing into dashboard so I can just kind of edit the code in a separate file. Specifically user prompts, and if we scroll down here, you will see that it's imported here. Therefore, the CSS oriented and the J6 oriented with this prompt box is found in userprompts.js and userprompts.css. To put simply, notice how this placeholder is what do you want to know? Add a bunch of S's right there. If I come back over, you will see them right here. Sometimes when developing front ends that work with backends, you want to compartmentalize and refactor your code or refactor your code so that you can easily adjust changes to it. So for this example, I refactored the code so that it's basically the submission box and all the logic that will be associated with the submission box will be its own file. What I want you to take away from that is that when you are, especially in the beginning, very much so in the beginning, opt towards refactoring your code into very specific segments that you import into a bigger parent file. And the reason why is that, one, this helps with error mitigation, as now you are associating every sector of your software to a specific component. For example, the user prompts box here is its own separate component. Therefore, if I ever have an error in dashboard.js, I know it's not going to be associated with that specific component, but something else in the code. This keeps it clean, and especially if you plan on doing more advanced logic, this is just the go around and how you should proceed. This is all set up though. We have our front end looking good. Let's set up our back end. Real quick, you might be like, wait. How'd you store that into Firestore? We did a previous episode on this, but in this context, we're simply referencing the path again of users, UID, unique identifier, and then we're referencing prompts, which is going to be our array that we go ahead and use to reflect previous prompts that the user has inputted. With all that done though, let's begin. First off, I'm going to make a real quick commit to this current branch. So if we mess up, we can always roll back. Git add, git commit, -m, front and ready, git push origin, and then we will do the branch name, which in this context is AI function. And there we go. Now that we've done that, we have a clean branch ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new terminal window so we can start initializing the functions for Python. And before I do that, as a good rule of thumb here, remember Firebase log out, Firebase log in, because we're about to do some backend logic here. Therefore, we got to make sure we're logged in. Firebase log in, hit Y. Perfect. Once you're logged in, you'll see that message. This is the email that is associated with your Firebase project, which we set up earlier. Now let's go ahead and initialize our functions. Firebase init function. Init functions, plural. So because of the fact that this is actually going to be creating a new function folder here that's Python based, we're going to do initialize. For the code base, just so there's clarity between the function folder and this new folder, I'm going to do Python underscore functions. Hit enter. Subdirectory, we'll do the same thing. Hit enter. For type of language, we're going to do Python, obviously. And here we go. Do you want to install the dependencies? Yes. Let it download. Once that is complete, you'll come over here and guess what, y'all? We have successfully initialized our Python's functions folder. In today's video, all the logic that we'll do today will be in the main.py. In theory, though, when creating applications, each file should be associated with a very specific task. For example, maybe there is a task that is analyzing PDFs. Therefore, you call it analyzepdfs.py. In addition, big tip here, big tip coming. If you are creating a very complex application that will run a ton of Python functions, you're typically going to have a folder that's going to be a light Python function folder and then a regular Python function folder. And what I mean by this is that each function, when running it into a cloud server, will have its own amount of memory associated with it, whether it's 2 gigs, 4 gigs, 8 gigs. And what this means in your context is that the higher amount of memory associated with a function, the more expensive it will be at scale. To put simply, if the function you're running only requires around 1 gig of memory, you don't want to run that towards an 8 gig function. This is stuff we set up in our Google Cloud. This isn't necessarily absolutely needed when you're just starting application building. But put it this way, if you're 2 months down the road, or just save this segment of the video, or just write this down in your notes, keep in mind that associating memory with functions does have implications at scale. E.g., some functions will actually take 8 gigs of memory, some will only take 1. And then depending on how you want to set up your functions, that is very pertinent. So you don't spend extra money you don't need to run a 1 gigabyte memory type of function on an 8 gigabyte server. Don't worry if that didn't make that much sense, as all you need to know for now is how do we connect to OpenAI's API. So go to openai.com, go to their dashboard, and just simply hit start building. Once you're logged in, simply go to API keys. Make sure you have a credit card that is placed onto your account for billing. I believe they give free credits. I don't remember entirely. I made this account a year and 6 months ago. All I can say for certainty is that the longer you have an account and the more you spend towards an API endpoint, the more advantages you get within OpenAI's ecosystem. Hit API key. From here, simply hit create new secret key and then give it a name that is relevant and that you'll be able to recognize. I'm going to create a burner key today. And the reason why is just to show you how to do this. So permissions all, and then we're going to say create new secret key. Once I click this, go and copy it, save it, get ready to use it elsewhere in your project. Perfect. We have our key. This allows us to access artificial intelligence in our software application here. Now let's actually do it. Coming over to OpenAI's pricing page, let me just walk you through why you would choose a specific model in your context. I've done videos on this, like probably too many videos on this, so you can obviously search up my name, type in like prompting with API. This video, I'm not going to go too heavily into the actual prompting of how to structure a prompt, more the sense of connecting it. If you want to see a video on that, I'll probably leave in the description down below / up there that shows you how to prompt with API. Here's the name of the game. When leveraging these endpoints, here are the models you're actually going to care about. The first one is GPT-4o Mini. This is a very attractive model because of the fact that what this model could do is be very cost effective at handling large amounts of data. We're talking about multiple pages in a PDF, like blocks of text. Use GPT-4o Mini. Very cost effective. GPT-4o is honestly in the same realm of being just as cost effective. What I suggest you to do is first opt for the Mini, see if that provides the value you want. If it works, then congratulations, you just got a very cost-effective solution. Now, if you're having issues and you're running into situations, opt for GPT-4o, see if it works in this realm. Yes, this is more expensive, but this is nowhere near the pricing that we saw a year and 6 months ago. For the amount of value you can provide an end user, this is still a great option. I mean, in the past, this used to be like $10, $15 for 1 million tokens. So then the next question is, okay, if those don't work for you, what's past that? That's going to come down to the O1 Mini and the O1 Preview. Now, only certain accounts have access to this yet. So if you have been using OpenAI's API for a while, you probably have access to it. But if you don't have access to it, don't worry. They roll this out pretty slowly, but everyone will get access to it. And who knows, by the time you're watching this video, they might have a new model called like O10 Preview. And I'm just like, what? Regardless, the same type of logic applies. There's going to be a lower base model that's very cost effective, very cheap for larger amounts of data. Then there's going to be these high level models that are more for complex outputs that require more input and more thought around it. When it comes to choosing between O1 Preview, O1 Mini, if you decide to use these models, opt for O1 Mini. It's more cost effective. In reality, O1 Preview is just overkill unless you really think that's going to apply to your application. So no overkill here, no roadkill. for O1 Mini if you actually need to use it. These are very, very, very high level models here. I mean, this is extremely impressive stuff here. But I assume if you're watching this a year or 2 years from now, they've probably come out with a lot better. But regardless, very, very cool stuff from OpenAI here. In today's video, though, we're going to be showcasing GPT-4o Mini, and the way you reference it in code is going to be right here. So GPT-4o Mini, nice. If you wanted to reference the other ones, just simply come up here, GPT-4o. Never really reference the ones with dates, as those are going to be deprecated models. For example, like 2 years from now, you'll never be able to access that endpoint, but probably this one, etc. Let's do it. We're back at it. I'm back. You're like, what just happened, Corbin? I got a bump up Slack message. It needed my attention, and I needed to address it. That's all done now. Different day. Let's do it. Wait, Corbin, I thought you were just a YouTuber. No. I run an entire software company, okay? Let's keep going here. So basically, the first thing I want to do to make sure that everything works good and we've installed this correctly is we're going to uncomment the code that we have here. Let's just prove that we can even deploy to our Firebase project with no hiccups. To do so, I'm going to simply select all this, Command/, and this is going to bring the code live here. Now, there's 2 ways we can test this. First way is we can deploy all the way to our project, or alternatively, let's just fire up the emulator and see if it's there. To fire up the emulator, we're going to make sure we're in a directory. We're going to say Firebase emulator start. We're going to hit enter here. Let's get running. Looking good so far. So we have initialized it, as you see right here on request example here. When it's green, that means it's good. So we have both functions. The first one we created in the previous tutorial for authentication, and this one, which is a HTTP callable, it looks like, in respect to Hello World, which is a very classic, it's a very nerdy thing. Nerds wear those on their shirt. I don't wear that. Also, if you can't tell, I'm sarcastic a lot of the times. That's just how I roll. But once we have that there, let's just go and deploy it to our Firebase app as well, so you can kind of see what it looks like in that context. To do that, we're going to just simply deploy our functions here. We're going to do Firebase deploy only functions, hit enter here, and then we should see an initialization of that new function here, and then just the redundance of the older function of a new user. There we go. As you'll notice here, it will skip it like I referenced in the earlier tutorial. It'll give you that little purple hue. And then you will see, since this is the first time we're creating this function, it's going to be updating here. And also notice it is a second gen function. This is number 2. Nummer 2. Post. For reference, it may stay there for a while. This typically happens when you initialize a function for the first time. So don't worry, it's not broken. There we go. Let it do its thing. So once we get that successful deployment here, we can come to our Firebase project. If I go over here to functions, we should see it. Boom. We have on request example here, and we have it as a V2. The reason we're doing this is I want to set a baseline. I want to basically prove to you that you can deploy a Python-based Firebase function so that everything past this in this tutorial, you won't be like, whoa, can I even deploy a function? Like, what's going on? Well, at least we confirm that you can deploy the example one. Therefore, now let's actually confirm the real one, which in this context is going to be an OpenAI API endpoint, which from what I remember of the purpose of this tutorial was we were going to put a prompt here and then get an answer here. We also are storing it in our Firebase database. Everything looks good. Let's proceed. So we don't really care about this example one. We can comment this out. I'm going to keep it there so when you guys can grab the code from me, you can just be like, I want to test this as well, as I will be putting this on a Git repo for free at the end of this series. Not yet. It's not over yet. Maybe it is by the time you're watching. It is November. It's almost Thanksgiving. Let's eat some good turkey. Therefore, let's open up a chat with Cursor AI here. We're going to hit Command L, Control L, and let's talk to our file here, which is going to be main.py. In theory, you could set up different files associated with different functions, which you'll probably do. But for now, let's create a good prompt here that we can use to get us on the right foot. This will be the prompt we start off with. Make sure in the main.py here, we're going to say, okay, great. Let's create a new function. Make it an HTTP callable, identifying the type of function here. I will send the payload of user prompt. From here, I want to do an OpenAI API completion, and then I provide example code from OpenAI's documentation. Here's the situation. I'm going to leave this in the description down below so you can reference it, as when you are calling certain API endpoints within OpenAI, they change it sometimes. So sometimes you'll get bad old code from AI because of the fact that it isn't up to date with the current documentation. So what I encourage you to do is go to the actual documentation. So in this context, it's create chat completion. If you are connecting other external APIs, same idea, just go to their documentation, find the most up-to-date code, and then just copy it and paste it into the chats. So at least it knows it's working on the right foot and you aren't getting a bunch of dead code. And when I say dead code, I'm referring to code that's old and deprecated. And just to clarify a little bit more what I mean by old and deprecated, basically as softwares keep improving and API endpoints keep going on, e.g. we get the O1 Mini, O1 Preview. The way OpenAI provides this as a API endpoint for software developers, sometimes they just change their documentation. Why do they do it? I don't know. I'm not part of OpenAI. They just do it. And so do other external API providers such as YouTube. I mean, they're on V3 right now. It used to be V1, so on. Regardless, we're going to keep going here. We're going to say also, here's my API key. Just hard code it for now. Obviously, in production, don't push a hard-coded API key in the file. When I say hard-coded, I mean like actually putting the entire string of text right here. I'm going to show you how to put this in a secure way using a .env, which we've used earlier in this series. For now, though, what I like to do is in the early days when you're brand new to coding, or maybe you are good at coding and this is like a new idea for you, just hard-code it. It gets one little error out of the way that you could possibly run into so you can understand at least your key works. And then obviously move it to a .env. And then for testing reasons, I went ahead and have it print out the console log, which you'll see pretty soon here. Therefore, let me show you the finished product here. But then there is like 3 or 4 steps you have to do or you're going to run into errors. So I'm here to help you. So we got to load it up in our emulator here. I'm actually going to go ahead and move this side by side so you can see this a lot better here. And you'll understand what I'm doing here. So basically, obviously, your emulator is going to be a little bubble for the backend functions we run. If you're like, what is all these messages? This looks like it's broken. Don't worry. That's just part of the game. So here's the situation. Basically, all I have it right now set up as is I put in a prompt here and I get an API response. Specifically, as you see above me, all we're doing is identifying that you are a helpful assistant. This is like the default messaging for OpenAI API. And then in addition to this, the actual prompt itself, the message that's going to be processed is just going to be what I put in. Now, in theory, this user prompt and how we can prompt API when it comes to creating software and creating value, check out this video right here. I'll make sure to leave in the description down below. I go full-blown, in-depth, my 5-step guide in how to create a good prompt for API. That sounded a little salesy. That sounded a little bit like top 5 things. But trust me, there's 5 steps to it. You can check out that video if you want to learn how to do prompting. I'm just here to show you how to connect the dots. So for example here, if I say, hello, what is the best way to eat a steak? And I hit submit. And with that question, we'll get a response right here. And sometimes you'll notice a function will be like beginning, finished, like really fast. Don't worry. Sometimes it'll false start like this. This just happens in the emulator. You won't be double charged. But from that question of how to make a perfect steak here, we got our 5-step guide from OpenAI talking about the quality of steak, cooking method, seasoning, temperature, and everything like, which we then can store into our database, everything by the board here. But let me show you how to get to this point. First things first, we need to make sure that our firebase.json is set effectively. So this should have already happened naturally when we did the Firebase init and initialized our directory of the Python functions folder. But if you don't see this, that's your first issue. You should see the Python functions, referencing our folder up here. So far, so good. Next, come to your firebase.js. Remember, this is where we're initializing everything for this application. Authentication, storage, Firestore, functions. Therefore, we need to identify that we are using a local function here, e.g. the call is coming from localhost 3000, localhost 4000. And the way we do this is obviously we're going to import our get functions, connect functions emulator, and then come down here is we need this very specific line here. We created this in the past tutorials for our auth, our Firestore, but now we also need it for a functions emulator. This makes it so when you send a message to your backend in this little bubble we have here, we're not going to get a CORS error where it's like, we don't recognize this. This must be false. No. There's no security issue here. We need to identify that it's okay if it comes from localhost 5001 as we are connecting this to specifically the context of our Firestore emulator. Now for you, you might be like, Corbin, how the heck do I even do this? I don't want to type it out. Well, one, you can either get the Git in the description down below when it's available, or just Cursor AI, simply be like, we need the following, and then you would simply just put in like, you could even go layman and be like, get functions, HTTP callables, but in theory, just simply screenshot this video or talk to ChatGPT. You want connect Firestore emulator, and then we want the get functions as well. With both of these set up, and when we've already set this up in previous tutorials, this is going to get you through that second error you might run into, which is CORS. Firebase.js, connect functions emulator, make sure you're importing the get functions, connect functions emulator, and make sure you're exporting the get functions, which in this context is the functions, get functions app. Therefore, we're just going to export functions here. Round 2 done. Let me help you with what else you could run into. The next area you'll probably run into has to do with OpenAI and importing it. There's going to be a high probability here. It's going to say something along the lines of module not found, there's an issue, etc., etc. This can be very frustrating as you've installed it. It should be installed, but why the heck is this going on? Your error should look something similar to this, where we see no module named OpenAI. The issue here is that we need to install this within the venv of our Python functions folder. If that doesn't make that much sense, don't worry, just follow these commands. What's nice about this is that once it's installed, once it's done, You can move past this. These errors typically don't show up again once you get them done. So the first major thing you need to do is you need to go to specifically installing this to your Python functions folder or whatever you called it. For me, I called it Python functions. For me, we're an actual backend app, which is our overall directory, but then we want to go one folder deeper, which is this folder right here, by simply doing /Python functions. I would save this to your cheat sheet, your little cheat sticky note, have this ready to go. Once you're in this, then we do source venv bin activate, and that's specifically this venv right here. To know whether you're in, you're going to see venv right here, you're going to see Python functions right here, and then the next one you want to do is pip install OpenAI. This is going to put it in our requirements.txt. Think of your requirements.txt as the dependencies we'll use in our function. What is a dependency? We'll be putting Stripe here. You could be putting YouTube here. You could be putting Google here. Like, this is just stuff of our ability to access external softwares, when we're building software. And OpenAI is obviously an external software. Once we do that, then we're going to do pip freeze requirements.txt. This is going to collect OpenAI and actually install it, as you see here. You should see all this, and then you'll be good to go. Now, let me go ahead and show you the next thing that you're probably going to have to do because of the fact that AI has not been updated as of recent when it comes to OpenAI's documentation and how to code in it. And what I'm referencing is that your AI may have gave you old code here of OpenAI.chat completion. This is no good. Lucky for us, they gave us a ways of going about solving this, but personally, the way I solved it was I simply just did pip install -- upgrade OpenAI, and this should bring you to the most up-to-date version of OpenAI. And then obviously what you'll see in the code here is that there's a way we reference this now for chat completion. Chat completion basically is just our ability to put in a prompt, get an output that you saw earlier. So since we're already here and we're already in this venv in the Python functions, we might as well just do our last command here. This is going to allow us to access .env files, which is our security measure, which will make more sense. I'll show you what I mean, but just do this line. Pip install python -.env. Perfect. That's all done. This is a lot. I know this is a lot. Maybe for some of y'all, this is like light work and this is a walk in the park. But for some of y'all, especially if you're brand new to this, don't worry. This is a lot. That's the point. That's why we're learning, and that's why we use AI to learn more and more every single day. This is why there is an entire market segment that currently exists for no-code / hybrid ways of building out applications. But for some reason, you found yourself on this series and you're like, no. I'm coding it out raw. Okay. Let me help you do it. Therefore, that's why a lot of these series and a lot of these videos, at least in this series, I plan on doing a whole nother playlist where I actually build out a software with a value proposition and sell it. There's going to be a whole separate playlist for this. But this series specifically is just connecting the dots. Because once the dots are connected, you can really fill in the gaps of what you want to do for your specific software. With all that done, let's do our .env here. Let's explain this code, explain the front end code, how it all connects, and proceed. OpenAI API key os.getEnv OpenAI API key. This is where we store high-risk variables. In other words, we are grabbing the API key found in our .env here. So if I click this, open API key, it's named the exact same. This is where you're going to paste your API key you get from the OpenAI dashboard. Once you paste it there and you made sure you installed that previous dependency, this will work. And notice how we reference this key in our chat completion over here. All right, I'm going to actually paste my key here so it keeps working. So far, so good. And obviously, what I'm going to do is I'm going to always leave these little console logs here, such as OpenAI key is not set in env file. I'm going to leave this in the code. So when you grab the code, you run into errors, you'll get clear ideas of where the errors are occurring. Scrolling down here is our current way of doing chat completions as of 2024 November. Client.chat.completions.create. The reason I say that and why I give a timestamp of the specific date is they may change this in the future, but you already know how to deal with that. Go to the documentation, see what the most recent one is, and then simply, grab this, Control L, Command L, and then simply give the updated code right there to Cursor AI, and then it'll give you the better way of doing this if they change it in the future. Regardless, I'm not going to go too much in depth on how to actually prompt for this. Here are some pointers. System, this is where you're going to give context of like, who are you? What do you do? How do you want structuring outputs? How do you want the AI to interact with the content coming in? And then the actual content itself, typically, this should just be data coming from the front end with very limited fixed text associated with it. When I say fixed text, I'm referring to stuff like you are a helpful assistant. No matter when we call this API endpoint, that will always show. There's no way this changes. Therefore, fixed text should rarely show up in the content. It should always be a variable that is found in the front end for a specific value you're looking for. Any type of directions or ways or structuring, outputs, inputs, everything should really be outlined in the content section here, as I referenced in that video earlier. So watch that if you want more depth of how to prompt, which I think is like I say it in 5 steps. We're good here though. This is solid. Right now, we have a fully functional backend. Let's look at our front end. So coming over to our front end, here is what you need to understand. First thing, typically when we are doing function calls to the backend, you will make this as its own separate component, which we kind of already did here. Sometimes you take this one step further where you have JS files that are just completely dedicated to that specific backend function because you're passing a ton of data in and out. In this example, this is kind of like a melding because of the fact that we do have a return here of some visual element, which for us is this right here. This is our visual element. Sometimes you have the JS file just purely be the function from the backend that we're calling and sending data to. In other times, it's okay to put the function directly within the front-end code as well. Basically, there can be a front-end element here with some type of calling of the backend. Sometimes there is just no return statement here, and it's purely just a backend code that we import and use within another component or JS file. All that will make more sense as you keep going here, but all you need to know from here is that when we call a function in our backend, we're always going to be importing get functions, HTTP callable, obviously if it's a callable in the sense of sending data, receiving data. Then we're going to always initialize with get functions here, and then we're going to get the specific name of our function that is found in the backend. So for us, it's generate completion. How do we know what the name is? Simply come back to your main.py here, def, generate completion. That's the name of it. If I said like generate apples, and I came over here, I would reference it as generate apples. So far, so good. And then what we do is that we're going to send data to this function. User prompt, input. The input's coming from the front end. Notice how we're passing the data as user prompt, and we're receiving the data here as user prompt. Finally, I have some dead code here when it comes to setting Firestore and everything about the board there. But so far, you have a pretty good idea of how to send data towards the backend and receive data back. So the last little step here that I want to do is I want to store the user's initial prompt, e.g. what I ask, and then I want to also store the output from OpenAI. As right now, I just have the output coming out as a console log, like it shows up here. And that's what you should do as well. Don't over jump the gun here. Have it work in the sense of a console log that doesn't really show up anywhere other than the console. And then once you have it work there, proceed to this next step. Last two things on this topic before we do the last step of today's tutorial, which will be storing these values in our Firestore database. First thing, if you run into errors, you run into issues, and you spend hours on this video today trying to get this to work, completely understandable. Completely makes sense. That's just kind of how it is, especially if you're new to this. That's how you learn to code. The beginning is very much like you are hitting walls on walls on walls on walls. I can't tell you, when I first started coding, there would be times where I would have to solve one issue and it took me 2.5 days to do it. That's the point. But once you get through it, the next time is a lot easier as you know how to connect the dots better. All right, let's go and wrap this up. If you feel like you learned something so far, make sure you leave a like. It's completely free. Let's check it out. Let me go ahead and show you the finished product here, and then I'll walk you step by step how I did what I did. So obviously, we are in the authentication phase here, where we've created the Firestore database of a relevant user with their unique UID and then their profile stuff over here. In addition to this, we have successfully made it so we can contact an OpenAI API endpoint for AI value. So for example, if I ask, what is the capital of Texas, and I hit submit, we're hitting the OpenAI API endpoint, and then we get a response right there. Now here's the best part. Not only did we successfully just integrate artificial intelligence into our software, but we are also storing the relevant data, such as the user prompt and the user output, or the AI output. And we're storing it here in the UID, AI answers in an array, prompts in an array. Now to be absolutely transparent, if you want to do this at scale, don't store it like this. Store them as docs. Docs are going to allow it so that if the user has a ton of different questions, a ton of different outputs, it's a more scalable database. I'm just here to show you how to connect the dots. Regardless, let me show you how I did this. Right off the bat, if you're dealing with a lot of data and a lot of testing, I encourage you just to restart your emulator. Once you restart it, you're good to go. From here, let me show you what I did. First off, I went ahead and took out the functions logic out of the user prompts.js. I kept this just as a return element in the sense of just a front-end UI, which then I took the real logic and just put it in my dashboard.js. Just makes a little bit more sense due to the fact that if you come down here, when we do handle user prompt submit, this is where we're storing the underlying data of the user's prompt here with the user.ref. So we might as well just call the function as well, which is the generate completion function that we talked about earlier. One little side note, I went ahead and commented out the little randomized quote section. I'm going to leave this in the code though, so when you grab this code from the Git, you can go ahead and enable it if you want to see it. But for now, it's commented out. And to uncomment, you simply just command / and you'll get it back. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referencing this little box. Therefore, we just went ahead and combined the logic of saving the user's prompt in that specific doc path of array union on prompts. And on top of that, sent that user prompt's data to our backend using this logic right here. Therefore, when we store the AI output though, we're going to store that within our Python function. Quick side note, the reason I'm describing the code how I am right now is for you to talk to Cursor AI if you need to with the Command L and simply put in the words I'm using into those chats to really get the best kind of outputs. For example, the code right here when referencing the kind of path and how we want to store it. Or earlier when I was talking about a scalable database, making sure that this data is stored as a doc rather than an array. Coming over to our main.py here, everything will stay the same except for the fact that we will now add the ability to store this in our database. Therefore, from the import, we're going to also import Firestore as well. Firestore is the database in the paths. And then notice with the code I'm going to provide you with, I give you these little comments so you really understand what's occurring. Obviously, same situation here. We're going to reference the data path, users, unique UID. And then we are going to take the assistance message, which comes from that chat completion request, and we're going to store it in AI answers. Therefore, as you can see, this emulator, AI answers the answer we got from OpenAI's API request. Here's the deal. When we access AI, like I showed you in today's tutorial, it's a little bit more nuanced in the sense of prompt structuring, prompt outputs. Like this is new stuff to software. A lot of the times when you connect external APIs, let's just say YouTube, for example, it's very much like input, output. For example, if we're referencing YouTube and maybe we want to download or upload a thumbnail from YouTube's API, it's very much so provide the video ID, get the video thumbnail. I say this to make clear that when accessing other external APIs, it's a lot simpler. The logic's a lot easier to understand. Artificial intelligence API endpoints, though, are a lot more nuanced, and that's partly part of the reason that you're watching this entire series to begin with, as this is a completely new market in software entirely. Our ability to prompt and get value through text is a big deal. And obviously, we can connect this API to other stuff OpenAI provides with, whether that is going to be higher level models, or alternatively, their Whisper API, DALL-E 3 API, everything like that. What I can say with confidence though is now you understand some troubleshoots and workarounds of issues you may run into and how to solve them. So if you feel like you learned something today, make sure to leave a like. The next video in this series will be storage, so I'll see you in that video. Welcome back to the series where I'm showing you how to actually build out software and its backend. If you're just joining me now, in the last episode, which will be in the playlist down below, we did the functions ability. In that specific video, I showed you how to create Python-based functions. We went ahead and created a function that connects to OpenAI's API, therefore integrating artificial intelligence into our software. Therefore, this is episode 6. And if you're confused, you're like, whoa, what just happened? I just landed on episode 6. Check out the playlist. Make sure to leave a like before you leave, as we're done with functions. Avida Zin. Today's video, we're going to go over the ability for storage in our backend. Storage is a very ubiquitous term here. This encompasses PDFs, videos, any type of file. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can have it so your user can reset their profile image. Therefore, in this video, you're going to learn the logic to set it up for images, but this applies to any type of file format. Therefore, let's begin. To start off here, let's go ahead and log in, create an account. The purpose of today's tutorial is we're going to add a little icon here that's going to allow us to click upload, and we're going to upload a new profile image that we'll store in the backend database. Obviously, we have our user, we have their unique ID, their UID, which is this right here. This is how we identify that this is the user themselves. So for example, for Orange Raccoon, right there, we know that this is their user identifier. We're going to be leveraging this in the storage path that we'll create together. As you'll see, storage is a whole separate section here when it comes to Firebase. First question might be, Corbin, why is that? That's because of the fact that when we store stuff here in the Firestore, this is going to be string-based data, URL links. I like coffee, chicken olive. Like this is text-based storage, number-based storage, very much binary in the sense. Therefore, when storing actual files or video files, .mp4s, .pngs, .jpegs, whatever it may be, .pdfs, you use storage. Check out episode 2 or 3, I believe. This is where we set up our storage bucket and set up the logic to do like a coin flip, whether the user is a cat profile image or a dog profile image. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to use the same storage bucket here, but we're going to create a new folder. And the purpose of this folder is for the unique information associated with each user. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just say profile image or profile picture. So this is going to be your base folder. It's like the global folder. From profile picture, this is where the next leg here is going to be the user's UID as the folder and then the image associated with that. That will make more sense as we get to the code here. But for now, we've set it up how we want to set it up. That's in Firebase, though. We need to actually make sure it's running in our emulator as well. Therefore, we got to come down here, and what you'll notice is in our firebase.json, we got to make sure we add a storage port here. If you're not familiar of what I'm saying here, remember when we launch our emulator, this is like our own little bubble. Localhost 3000 is like the fake little front end with no internet, how we can create a front end. Our fake little back end is Firebase emulator start, which are referenced by all these different ports. Therefore, we need to create a port for storage. Let's start off by doing that then. We're going to go ahead and open a chat with Cursor AI. we're going to make sure we select Firebase.json, but also select your Firebase.js. As you remember, these communicate with each other. So right off the bat in our Firebase.js, we got to ensure that we're importing storage here so we can leverage it outside of our application. Here we go. Okay, we want to launch these storage emulators, so make sure this line shows up in the port in the .json, Firebase.json, and the .js export the storage so we can use it elsewhere. Hit enter, and we should get our relevant code. Looks like I used up my free. So we're going to have to do a smaller version of cursor, which is cursor small. So we got our port here of storage. Coming back over here, we go to our Firebase.json, scroll down, and we'll add it right here. Make sure you add a comma. Let's get rid of this comment. We don't need that. We're good to go there. Coming over to the Firebase.js, it doesn't look like it outputted perfectly, but we get the general idea here. We need to get the storage and the functions here. So we're going to add these lines. Let me go to shrink down. Coming back over to Firebase.js here, we need to import get storage, connect storage emulator. Looking good. This is like the other logic that we saw earlier with the functions. We're going to paste that here. Nice. And then we're going to scroll down here. We're going to make sure we initialize it with const storage, get app storage. I like it. I'm going to go and do that. Notice how we do this with all the other things. Get auth, get firestore, get functions. Looking good so far. And then finally, we need to make sure we have this nice little line here to ensure we get no localhost CORS errors. Connect storage emulator, if I can speak, 9199, not 911. And then finally, the storage bucket. Storage right there. Good to go. We did a lot of this in the past tutorial, so this should start making more sense to you. As you know, the Firebase.js is basically our way of accessing all the abilities of Firebase within our front end and our back end. Mostly our front end, though. So far, so good. We've successfully imported and structured our storage bucket. Now, if you haven't already, what I encourage you to do is let's rerun the emulator here because now we have a new port that we want to run with. Firebase emulator start. And for us to confirm whether or not this is live, we're going to go to our localhost 4000. It actually looks like I forgot one step here, which is going to be the Firebase init for our configuration. Let's go and do that. Firebase init. And I'm actually remembering I did forget that because what I did in the previous tutorial was I just referenced the links to those fixed profile pics of the dog and the cat. I didn't actually initialize it yet. So let's do that. As we know, Firebase init allows us to access all the different abilities in Firebase. We're going to go to a storage here. We're going to hit space. We're going to hit enter. Everything should just be default here. Enter. And we're good to go. So far, so good. Start the emulator. Here we go. Loading in the storage roles. Perfect. Coming back over to localhost 4000, we should see it on. There we go. It is on. And then if we go to storage here, we have our storage bucket. Looking good here. Now, obviously, if you want to enable anything else, such as real-time database emulator, follow the same steps, but reference that kind of terminology when importing it to your Firebase.js and .json. From now, though, we are good to go. Let's go to dashboard.js. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to give the user the capability to import their own image, therefore change their profile pic. As someone might log in and be like, you know what? I don't like that cat. I don't like it. So we got to change it. Let's do that. To get this working, we're going to have to add a couple files to this chat. Obviously, we're going to need the dashboard.js, and we're going to go ahead and need the firebase.js so it has context of where we're getting the storage bucket. In addition, let's make sure we add the dashboard.css. Now look at the prompt. All I did was this. I went ahead and pointed out the very specific piece of code that is the profile image. That little circle right there, that code that's associated with that, I pasted it into the prompt. And then I simply said this. We can upload a new image and also have it so the max file size is 5 gigs. Also, the storage path, let's do profile picture, which we identified before, UID, image name. That's it. Hit enter, get your code. And of course, you can get the code for free in the description down below in the GitHub repo. So make sure you leave a like. It's completely free. It's right there. So let me go ahead and walk you through this code though. First major thing, you may run into an error right off the bat where it's like, you don't have access to this. This storage path, you don't have access to. Don't worry. To fix that, we're going to come down to our storage.rules. Now, right here is where we set up the rules of who has access to what depending on their authentication and admin level. For right now, we're going to allow a user to read and write from this path. I went ahead and identified the path. Match, profile picture, UID. Notice how it's smart enough to understand that user ID is a variable, image name. Perfect. And then we're going to do the next line here, which is going to allow a user who is authenticated to access this path. This basically makes it so that they can upload an image and have no issues. Therefore, coming back to the code here, notice what we do. From our Firebase.js, we are importing storage. That's what we referenced earlier. Coming down here, I went ahead and re-imported the font awesome icon that we used on our homepage from earlier tutorials so we can get a nice little upload icon, therefore allowing me to use the icon FA upload, which you'll see pretty soon here. And then finally, we went ahead and imported the relevant things we need in order to actually do this. Ref, upload bytes, get download URL from Firebase/storage. Therefore, in your output for your code, if you don't see any of that, something might have messed up. not necessarily the icons, more in the sense of the imports from Firebase. Now, coming down here, it's pretty simple on the logic. So the idea is that obviously we're doing handle file change. We're changing the profile image. So maybe we want to do handle new image for profile, whatever you want to call it. Scrolling down here, the first important piece of code here is setting max file sizes. Now, this applies to anything, whether we're talking about videos or PDFs, everything in between. You want this line here. You want to do file.size and then identify the max amount of size you're willing to upload. Why is this important? Because the last thing you want to happen is a user uploads like a 100 gig file. Not only is this extremely expensive at scale, but also like, why are they uploading a 100 gig file? That's a lot. So whatever it may be, in reality, this shouldn't be 5 gigs for a profile image, maybe max of 2, maybe even max of 1. Just set limits. You don't want to be overpaying at scale. Furthermore, notice how we're identifying the specific path here. Profile picture, which we made before, the user's UID, and then the file name. Whatever the file name is on their computer, that's how we're going to store it. From there, we go ahead and get the download URL, which we then reflect in the user's profile image, which you can see right here. Now, typically in this logic, what it'll do is it will fall back to the original profile image of the dog or the cat if it doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it will use the user's specific, unique image they uploaded. Let me show you this live. So I've come back to my image here and I'm like, you know what? I don't like that cat. I want a dog. So to do so, right now I have it set up where we have our nice little upload icon here. I click it, and what you'll notice is that by me clicking that, it's going to pop up like this. Pretty nice. And we're able to click the specific file we want for a profile image. I also want you to notice how we set parameters on the file type. So for example here, I'm not able to upload a zip. I'm not able to install cursor again. I'm not able to upload a video because I identified that in the code. For your upload process, if it's like only videos should be accepted or only PDFs should be accepted, identify that in the code. How, Corbin? Put it in a Cursor AI chat. Be like, hey, I only want this size file and this type of file. It's very simple. For me though, I want to change this to a dog. Double click. And we officially have a dog profile pic. That concludes this episode. Make sure you leave a like. It's completely free and it helps me out here. In the next episode, we're going to be checking out analytics, showing you how to connect this to Google Analytics, which is actually pretty prevalent for us to understand, one, just how is our software doing, but two, for conversion metrics such as sign up and purchase. But for now, we set up the storage. We're good to go. And I'll see you in the next video. Let me show you how to connect Google Analytics 4 to any type of web application or software you're developing. Connecting analytics to your application is extremely valuable. So let's learn how we do it. Welcome back, y'all. In this video, we're going over to one of our last blocks in this entire playlist here. If this is the first video you're clicking on, then you found yourself in one of the most in-depth series on YouTube on how to build out an actual application with a real backend. So no, this isn't going to be a 10-minute video showing you how to create some pseudo application. Let me show you how to actually do it. In the previous video, I showed you how to upload files to your application. So we're done with files. You can say bye-bye files. This was leveraging Firebase's storage feature. In today's video, we're going to be looking at analytics and more specifically GA4. And we're going to set up a couple things. First off, we're just going to connect it so we can actually see it working. Following this, we're going to set up very specific events such as sign up and purchase. So we can add this for later tutorials here, which I'm going to show you how to integrate Stripe purchases, and then go as far as even showing you how to track conversions in a custom app like this. So yes, as the title of this entire series shows you, let me show you how to build out a real backend. So coming over to the application we've been developing here together, this is going to be a pretty fast tutorial, so don't worry. It's not really that crazy what we have to do. First off, I got to point out some things to make sure that you just have the building blocks set up so you don't run into any errors. So first major thing I got to make sure that you have is make sure to go to your project over here, hit this little gear icon, hit project settings. In the integrations tab, make sure you have Google Analytics enabled. Once you have that enabled, you'll be good to go. Coming over to our Firebase.js, which we already set up in our previous tutorial here, the relevant variable that's going to allow you to connect the Google Analytics 4 to your app is going to be measurement ID. We've already set this up together. We've already done this. Therefore, if you don't have measurement ID there, so maybe you have API key all the way down to app ID, but you don't see measurement ID, here's the situation. When you were creating your Firebase project, you didn't enable Google Analytics 4. So now you're in a situation now where you have to enable it a little later on, which, as I showed you, is simply in your settings, project settings, integrations. So therefore, if you are late to the party and now you're just enabling Google Analytics in the latter half here, don't worry. Once you enable it, to find your measurement ID, come down to the settings here, like admin. In admin here, hit data streams. Click your application name, and then it's going to be found right here in the top right. It's blurred out, obviously, but you can see measurement ID. You're going to copy this. Once you have that copy, simply add the line measurement ID, semicolon, and then add process.env.react app Firebase measurement ID, and place your actual measurement ID in your env, which I've showed in previous tutorials. With that all set up, and you're good to go. And some of y'all right now are like, Corbin, I already have measurement ID. All right, chill. Coming down here, make sure you have the lines of const analytics, get analytics app. And with that done, The next line is very simple. Come over to your app.js. Go to your top of your file, type in import. We're going to do /, and we're looking to import Firebase. Not that. Incorrect, Cursor AI. Like that. Import / Firebase. Good to go. We're going to go ahead and push this to our production environment because right now on our local host, this isn't really relevant. Google Analytics should only be communicating when we are in actual prod environment. When I say prod, I'm referencing an actual live website link anyone can access. Make sure you have these commands in your cheat sheet, which you probably already do. But remember, it's npm run build and then it's Firebase deploy. And actually, before I do that, I got to make sure I cross my I's or dot my I's and cross my T's. Firebase log out, Firebase log in. Let's first make sure that we're in the right project, we're deploying to the right project, and that we are authed. Firebase log out. Then we'll do Firebase login. Hit Y. Make sure to choose a specific account associated with your Firebase account, like the email. And then once you see that message, we are successfully logged in. That right there should be part of your workflow anytime you decide to start working your application. You know, it's a nice 10 a.m., you're drinking some coffee, Firebase log out, Firebase log in, proceed. Now to find out what your project is, which you probably already know, you can use this command as well. We can do Firebase projects list. I believe there's an S here. I always get this command a little off. Okay, I got it right that time. So for me, it's actual backend app. And sometimes what you need to do is basically do Firebase use actual backend app. Good to go. Everything's looking good. Now let's run those command lines. npm run build, entire front end. Firebase deploy, entire backend. Enter. Let's get some Google Analytics. Google. I love Google. Y'all don't realize if I say I love Google like 5 times in a video, YouTube's algorithm picks up on it. They're like, hold up, we got to push this video farther. So 2 things just happened here that I want to point out. First thing is that when you give little like warnings like package.json indicates an outdated version of Firebase functions, don't worry. That's like not necessary for you to always update to the most recent version as you saw in previous tutorials. And then this second error here is typically solved by just installing the dependencies again to that specific function folder. So this has to do with my Python functions. Let's go on and try that. Firebase init functions. So it's going to ask me whether to initialize or overwrite or simply overwriting. We're going to choose our Python functions folder. We're going to choose, obviously, Python. And we're going to say no to everything except the last question here, which is going to be, do you want to install dependencies now? Why? Not why as in why as in yes. With that done, let's retry our commands here. And then if you're wondering, like, how are they showing up like that? Just use your arrow keys on your keyboard. npm run build, Firebase deploy. Perfect. Once you see that message there, deploy complete, we're good to go. Let's jump over to our live website and see if we show up in Google Analytics. One thing I want to point out, though, before we do that, is that if you deploy and you see a white screen, that can be very annoying. This is how you solve. Go to firebase.json, go to hosting, go to where it says public, and if it says public right there, change that to build. Once you do that, run the exact same command again, and your website should deploy perfectly fine. Obviously, if you run into issues, open up a cursor chat here using Command L or Control L. Simply put in, hey, when I deploy to localhost 3000, I see my React app. But when I deploy to an actual live website link, it's a blank white screen if you're still running into issues. Coming over here, though, you can see we're currently at the live website. I can go and scroll through AI automation, code generation, our tech stack, and everything above the board. And there we go. You can see we're in an actual backend app. And we got 2 active users. To prepare us for the next tutorial here, let's set up some key events. I'm going to go to admin again. In admin, scroll all the way down and go to events. The events page are either native events that are just seen in any type of website, or alternatively are custom events we'll create and send to GA4 to do whatever. So what you see right here at first view, page view, session start, this is just standard stuff. This is data that we just collect in the long term. But the important thing here for you to understand is right here, mark as key event. If I turn this on and I come over to key events here, you'll see the default event of purchase right here, which I think we would assume is a key event. And then we'll also see the other one of first view, which is marked as a key event. Here's why that's important, and here's what you can take away from this. Key events is where we're going to put in other types of conversion events. So obviously, first view, that's not really a key event. We could care less if someone just goes to the website and then leaves. What we'll put here is things like add to cart, sign up, etc. For now, though, you've successfully connected Google Analytics to your web application, so you're good to go. The next 2 lessons here will be payment with Stripe and how we track that with conversion code with GA4. These 2 lessons will be found exclusively on my school community here, so that'll be in the description down below so you can check them out. They're going to be full-blown, in-depth, same style, same way of teaching, same everything. I have no clue what that price is going to say when you watch this video, but all I can guarantee is that whatever you see is going to be the lowest it ever is, as this is going to increase over time. If you felt like you learned something in today's video, make sure to leave a like. It's completely free, and I'll see you in the next video. GA4 has been connected. Google. 2 random videos. That's my face. I'll see you in the next video.